dogs and cats, but not pigs and cows and horses.
Very true.
Okay, everybody. This meeting is called to order in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. This meeting was included in a list of meeting dates sent to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 3rd, 2019, and was posted on the bulletin board of Borough Hall, 221 South Fifth Avenue on January 3rd, 2019, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. Fire exits are to my left and to my right. If you come up to speak, please speak into the microphone, and assistive listening devices are available. Pastor Seth, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey. Roll call, please.
Mayor Brillmittler,
Here.
Councilman Fine,
Here.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin, Councilman George,
Here.
Councilman Hale,
Here.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan,
Here.
Councilwoman Walkovitz,
Here.
Borough Attorney Schmier,
Here.
Borough Administrator Hover,
Here.
At about this time of year for the last several years, we all were privileged to have Franco Jurisic remind us of the importance of pancreatic cancer and and make us more aware of its existence in our community, in our country, and in the world. Franco isn't here with us anymore, but his family is. And I'd like to ask them to join me up at the microphone, wherever it is, for a moment. I'd like to read a proclamation. And Councilman Fine, you were the one who spoke with me about this, so would you join me at the podium? Okay. Whereas in 2019, an estimated 56,770 people will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the United States, and 45,750 will die from the disease. Whereas pancreatic cancer is one of the deadliest cancers, is currently the fourth leading cause of cancer death in the United States. And whereas pancreatic cancer has the lowest survival rate among all major cancers, and whereas pancreatic cancer is the only major cancer with a 5-year relative survival rate in the single digits at just 9%, and whereas for the 10% of people who are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, an early stage when a surgical removal of the tumor is possible, the 5-year survival rate is 34%. Whereas if pancreatic cancer has spread to surrounding tissues or organs, the 5-year survival rate is 12%. And whereas for the 52% of people who are diagnosed after the cancer has spread to a distant part of the body, the 5-year survival rate is 3%. And whereas approximately 1,290 deaths will occur in New Jersey in 2019, and whereas every day more than 1,257 people worldwide will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and an estimated 1,184 will die from the disease. And whereas it is estimated that in 2025, there will be 557,688 new cases of pancreatic cancer diagnosed. And whereas the good health and well-being of the residents of the town of Highland Park are enhanced as a direct result of increased awareness about the symptoms and risks factors of pancreatic cancer and research into early detection, causes, and effective treatments. Now, therefore, I, Gail Brill-Mittler, Mayor of the Borough of Highland Park, do hereby designate November 21st as World Pancreatic Cancer Day in the Borough of Highland Park, and ask that we all remember Franco and what he contributed to all of our lives. Thank you. Okay. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular and conference meetings held May 7th, 2019, May 21st, 2019, and June 11th, 2019 as distributed?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin,
Yes.
Councilman George,
Yes.
Councilman Hale,
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan.
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz.
Yes.
Okay. Council reports. I'm going to start on my right this time with Councilwoman Kim Chohan.
Sure, may I have a short report? I know we have a lot of public comment and more fun stuff to get towards, but Rec Advisory Committee met last night, and we've heard from the residents that there's an interest in pickleball. So we are looking into that and be on the lookout for next season. We're also working on a survey at the end of the season for participants. The committee will be gathering questions, and we will be launching that soon. Over in Senior Services, open tomorrow to the public from 10 a.m. to 12, free wireless phone assurance. Wireless brought to you by Virgin Mobile. Enrollment is available to individuals who qualify based on federal state assistance programs like Medicaid or SNAP. With Arts Commission, the access granted opening reception will take place on November 5th, 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Penstock. And the long-awaited Band-Aid bench is finally here. The permanent home for the bench is alongside Rite Aid on South 4th Avenue. And also the Arts Commission is applying for another Middlesex County Arts grant to support a spoken word workshop for February through April 2020. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilman Hale, do you have a report?
I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I wanted to start by saying a big thank you to all the members of the Highland Park Universal Access Committee and the members of the Highland Park Food Pantry. They recently came together to figure out a creative way to use money dedicated to the Universal Access Committee through handicap parking fines to purchase and pass out shopping carts to food pantry patrons. And I understand that the joy and spirit of cooperation and giving to those most needed in our community when the carts were passed out left many people at the event in tears, both recipients and providers alike. And I wanted to recognize all of the hard work that it took for them to come together to do that. I also wanted to report with some sadness that Letitia Cataldi has decided to step down as the founding chair of the Immigration and Refugee Committee. Letitia has led the commission with honesty and integrity and unflinching commitment to our Immigrant and Refugee Committee and to all of Highland Park since its founding. So I wanted to thank her very much for her service. Current member Tracy Candiano is going to serve as the new chair, along with John Adler, who will serve as vice chair. So I wanted to welcome them to those leadership positions. I felt it was important to mention those two examples of cooperation, those two examples of getting things together, because I know tonight is not going to be a kumbaya moment in many respects. There are people on passionate interests on both sides of this issue tonight. We have received over 100 individual email letters. There are 3 separate petitions going around. I did some counting and some math. 2/3 of the letters were in favor of our current resolution, 1/3 were not. 2 of the petitions are in favor, 1 is not. Both have the petitions have received, all of the petitions have received over 200 signatures. That's a significant amount of effort, a significant amount of people who are passionate about this issue. And I bring that up just simply to say that as we are having this discussion tonight, I hope all of us can recognize and have some humility about our positions. That there are clearly differences about this issue. It is an important issue. We have our stances, we have our thoughts, we have our arguments. But I hope that we can all recognize that there are other thoughts and there are other arguments in this issue. We may not come to a perfect consensus, but I hope that we can treat everybody tonight with the respect and the honor that they deserve from their passionate positions. Over the last several months, we've discussed, we've debated, we've had this issue back and forth. We've had people who have argued that one person or another is not good at their faith. We've had people who wants to protect the First Amendment more. We've seen attacks on Jews and non-Jews alike about how we define anti-Semitism, its size, its scope, and its danger. Specifically, I wanted to point out that my friend Matt Hirsch was trolled on Facebook for being a Jew in name only. That's unacceptable. My friend John Kovac gave a passionate speech in favor of of calling out BDS, of calling out anti-Semitism, and as he left the room, he was derided and saying, the sad part is he actually believes this is delusional. That's also unacceptable. Throughout this entire discussion, we clearly all agree that anti-Semitism is unacceptable. How we define that, how we get that, is a process that we're going through. I know that this community genuinely believes anti-Semitism of all shapes and sizes is unacceptable, and I don't think that we can afford to hide and say it only exists in particular areas. We're going to have that discussion tonight. We're going to have that debate tonight. I just hope that we can have it as a community where we respect the fact that there are differences in our community. Passionate argument is a good thing. Division may even be a good thing in some cases, but I hope that we can do it with a respectful way. So with that, I'll end my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we commenting on this now?
No,
Oh, because I had mine prepared as well, too. I just thought it was
no,
before the
you can
vote.
hold your comments to
Oh,
when we
okay.
actually address it. Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Thank you. I'll try to be brief here. Ka-ching. I'd like to thank the Governor Murphy's office, Department of Transportation Commissioner Diane Scicchetti, and the New Jersey Department of Transportation for prioritizing multimodal transportation and for appropriating another $100 million to the fund. Out of that, they've divvied up the funds and allocated monies to different communities to help them move along with some of the grants they've already won. Last week, they awarded us another $220,000. Yeah, we're up to something near like $650,000 plus another $150,000 in engineering. These are all monies that we just don't have. And this is so helpful to us. It's monies that will first go for the 2016 grant. The monies will go to improve the neighborhoods around our primary and elementary schools. Of course, it's in the middle of a residential neighborhood, so everyone should benefit from that. It'll be in terms of redoing curbs and curb cuts, so it's more accessible pedestrians, for parents with strollers, for bicyclists, for anybody that is not in an actual vehicle. And the second set of funds that we got are for a 2018 grant, and those monies actually are to make these same kinds of improvements throughout the entire borough. And this particular set of money is to help us move straight ahead with that first grant. So we're really grateful to them, and again, it's the only way to get money like this is to raise taxes, and that is not a popular option at all. I know I don't want my taxes raised. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention was that this Thursday is Halloween, and our Main Street will be celebrating. Many shops, most of the shops are going to be open, giving out candy to the kids. This was a tradition that Main Street began several years ago. Was the 2013 Hurricane Sandy. And it worked out so well, and it brings more foot traffic into the businesses, and we're just delighted to be able to support this. Rain or shine, bring your umbrellas, we won't melt, so we just want to encourage everybody to come out and enjoy. And I just briefly, Jacqueline, thank you and your lovely family, and for coming out today.
If I could just elaborate a little on your discussion regarding the Safe Routes to School and the grants. Not only will the improvements that we'll be able to pay for, including more curb cuts and striping for pedestrian walkways, help our students get to and from school, but it will also be a tremendous help for our seniors, anyone with handicaps, and anybody who enjoys walking throughout our community. So I'm really excited about the funding that Susan and her team have been working very hard to get for us through grants. Thank you, Susan. Okay, moving down on the other end of the dais here, Councilwoman Foster Dublin, do you have a report?
I'll make it very brief. Last night, Knights of Columbus, our public safety team, received many awards, and I'm very proud of them. They received the police department, fire department, and first aid. Once again, the Knight of Columbus went out of their way to thank them for the service that they provide to keep everyone in Highland Park safe. And I also want to echo thank you to our branches of public safety that receive these awards, and they do a phenomenal job of keeping us all safe. Yesterday, we also had the trunk and treat, and it was a great event. It was a huge turnout. It was the first time we had a trunk and treat, and we had lots of kids that came out to participate. At the youth center, they put together a spooky house, and it was really good because all the kids, once they left from the community center, the trunk and treat, they went over there and they had a great time. And I want to see this continue. I even have residents that said, they will help us to get some of the blow-ups for next year because they really and truly enjoyed the event yesterday. I want to just remind everyone that this weekend is daylight saving times. It's time for you to check your smoke detector, your carbon dioxide detector, and change the battery filters and what have you. And please remain safe. And I will be announcing when the firehouse will be having their open house. So anyone who's interested can participate, can go over there, see all the devices that keep us all safe, learn some safety tips, and that will be coming soon. We'll have something on Facebook, and we'll be putting out announcements everywhere. We received a lovely thank you note from one of our residents regarding our police department, and it reads, "We live at 122 Graham Street. Barry Diamond has a lifeline device and is paralyzed on one side. On many occasions, he has pressed the button and have called the police for help to either come downstairs, go downstairs to get in the shower, get in or out of the shower. And every officer who has ever answered this call has been compassionate, kind, understanding, and just all around wonderful. You are the best at this for our small town. Thank you. We feel blessed to live in a community that has such an amazing police department. Sincerely and with much gratitude, Linda and Barry Diamond. And that was a note of thanks for our police department, who continue to do a wonderful job in keeping us all safe. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything further, Councilwoman?
That's going to be later.
Okay. All right. Councilman Fine, do you have a report?
I do not have a report tonight, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Council President George, do you?
I do, Mayor, just very, very briefly, though, so we can get to the larger parts of the agenda. DPW, in our monthly Public Works meeting, we discussed the fact that the charges for tonnages have gone up significantly and are projected to increase for both recyclables and for trash. So we are working very diligently to look at scheduling for 2020 to find some ways to cut that down, to avoid some of those costs and to find some alternatives as well. Along with that, the Meadows Trail volunteers, STAC, and the Native Plant Sanctuary have already done their budgets for the coming year so that we can start to review them. And I hope on the next agenda, coming out of the Sustainable Highland Park and the Environmental Commission, there's a resolution circulated from the state organizations supporting electric vehicles or EVs, and we hope to have a resolution on a number of towns are passing who are deeply involved in electric vehicles to tell the state to get on with passing the legislation to implement the second round 2 Volkswagen settlement grants for electric vehicles. Other than that, I'll save it for the next time.
Okay, thank you. Borough Administrator, do you have a report?
Just a few brief items, Mayor. First, I just wanted, for those of you who came a little early, you caught a glimpse of the draft master plan reexamination and land use element update that's underway. We're tracking so that we will have copies available at the clerk's desk hopefully by this Friday, and they'll be posted online, so have a chance to read it, think about it, and if you're interested in attending the next planning board meeting, which is in November, and I'm not going to mess up with the date. November 14th, there will be another presentation there, an opportunity for public comment, but we're looking to adopt before the end of the year as required by statute. So I just wanted to make sure you're all aware, if you're interested, there are still some opportunities to contribute your ideas. I wanted to remind everybody that on Friday, November 1st, the final phase of the plastic bag ordinance, or otherwise known as the Bring Your Own Bag ordinance, is going to be taking effect. And so while paper bags will be allowed to be distributed, there will be a 10-cent fee charged at that point. So this is that point in which we've been, it seems like, I guess it's been 6 months, so we're here. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware. If you have any questions or you run into any issues, just let us know and we'll address them as they come. But, thank you, and thanks to Sustainable for keeping that initiative moving. And then the last thing, it's not a popular topic, but I didn't want to pass up a chance to remind everybody, if you manually pay your taxes, it's really important that you do it by November 12th. That's the final date prior to tax sale for the fourth quarter. The grace period ends at that point, and we don't want you to get ensnared in the tax sale process. So I just would like to remind you all, November 12th, you can check your accounts online, you can call the tax office, and you can also drop off payments now. If we're closed, there is a payment box right outside the front doors here. So just try to remember to do that. That's all I have, ma'am.
Terry,
Okay.
just give us a quick update on the deer.
Councilwoman's asking me to, just quick update on the deer survey that we've commissioned. It looks like the first week in December is likely when they're going to want to do the drone survey to do the deer count. We had to redo this analysis because the prior contractor, for lack of a more technical term, flaked on us, and we are going to have a new study commissioned. We did not pay for the old study, but we did have to wait for the leaves to drop in order to do this accurately. A professor at Raritan Valley College does this work, and actually I'm really excited because it seems like a better fit for us in the long run. After that data is in hand, we will move forward with scheduling a community meeting to discuss the findings, as well as invite the Fish and Wildlife folks in to lay out what the alternatives are, and to kind of lay out kind of the myths and realities of deer management in a community like ours. So you'll keep an eye out, and I would encourage you, if you don't get our borough emails, that's an easy way to just be apprised of when these kinds of meetings are happening, and you can sign up on our website.
Okay, thank you. Borough Attorney, do you have a report?
No report, Madam Mayor.
Okay, just a couple of things before we get on to business. I know later on the agenda we'll be discussing a resolution regarding anti-Semitism in Highland Park. Just this weekend, we observed the 1-year anniversary of the shooting of 11 individuals while they were at prayer in their synagogue in Pittsburgh. And I would like to take a moment right now to remember the 11 innocent people who lost their lives. Thank you. Okay. I certainly will have some more to share with you later on, but I'd like to get on with our regular agenda for now. Okay. We're about to start our first public comment session. This session is limited to a total of 15 minutes, and each person who comes up to speak will have 3 minutes to talk. I'll be looking at our borough administrator, who will be keeping the time for us. By the way, there are a few empty seats here on this side. I think there may be one in the back row over here, so if you don't have a seat, please raise your hand if you're next to one that is empty. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Would you step up to the microphone? Basically, just a reminder again, we're talking about 3-minute maximum for each speaker and a total of 15 minutes for this session. So, Borough Administrator, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Please state your name and address.
John Kovac, 3rd Avenue, Highland Park. Mayor and council members, you must decide if we have the courage to say no to hate and anti-Semitism in town. We are not just talking about the anti-Semitism of white nationalists. It takes no guts whatsoever in a liberal town to condemn neo-Nazis. But it's not neo-Nazis with tiki torches who have been fomenting trouble in Highland Park. BDS is an international hate group, so designated by the United States Congress and the United Nations. Its agenda is set by terror organizations, including the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. This movement dishonestly co-opts the language of civil rights and social justice in its effort to destroy Israel and render American Jews objects of demonization and discrimination. Enough damage already has been done by and to our public library. The next target will be our schools. This is how BDS operates. Whatever allows itself to be touched by it is tarnished. As stated in the September 2019 UN report on religious intolerance, anti-Semitism is toxic to democracy and mutual respect of citizens and threatens all societies in which it goes unchallenged. Quoting from the UN report again, Acts engendered by anti-Semitism which result in social exclusion and harassment of Jews can violate the right to freedom of religion or belief, in particular the right to be free from discrimination on the basis of one's religion. This is what BDS does at our universities, at Rutgers, and even worse at Columbia. We must not let Highland Park become a cauldron of hateful BDS propaganda like Newton, Massachusetts, where since 2011, high school students have been given material such as a poem by Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish containing these lines: "The usurper's flesh will be my food, beware of my hunger." This will be next for us if we allow it to happen. Some are afraid their reputations will be besmirched if BDS acts of anti-Semitism are condemned in a resolution. Some have even made the ludicrous claim that the resolution would defame them. Well, everyone's individual conduct speaks for itself and is to be judged on its individual merits. The equally ridiculous claim has also been proffered that this resolution legally bars BDS supporters from office in town. And while I would never vote for a candidate who supports BDS, just as most here would not support a neo-Nazi candidate, the resolution clearly has no legally binding effect whatsoever. Some who complain help bring this trouble to town and now urge us to believe this is a geopolitical issue, unrelated to the education of our children and the spread of hatred against Jews here. Do not be fooled by this. The resolution condemns all forms of anti-Semitism, including BDS tactics that seek to destroy Israel and demonize American Jews. It is a start, not a solution.
John,
it has the effect,
we're at the 3
last
minutes.
sentence. It has the effect of an advisory opinion, not of law. More will need to be done by the good residents of this town to ensure that hate has no home here. Thank you.
Please state your name and address.
Jeff Vardaro, Wayne Street. I just have a couple questions to start with. Councilman Hale, you're the liaison to the Human Relations Commission, correct?
Yes.
Has the Human Relations Commission seen the draft of the resolution that's been substituted for the previous draft tonight? And have they been offered an opportunity to opine on it or give any feedback?
They've seen the previous draft.
But not the draft that you're preparing to vote on?
Correct.
Okay. Is there some emergency that we need to do this without going through the process of asking the Human Relations Commission for their feedback?
Just that the Human Relations Commission has given quite a lot of feedback throughout the whole process.
But not on this language?
The language that's in the current, as Councilman Fiden, is language that's been in various versions of many of the previous resolutions.
But not this language?
Not this specific.
Okay. And Councilman Fine, this is your draft that you propose to substitute tonight?
Correct.
So can I just ask a clarifying question about the operative provision, the bottom of page 1, where it says the mayor and council recognize that the founding goals of the global BDS movement and many of the strategies used by BDS campaigns are anti-Semitic. Can you tell me which of the strategies used by BDS campaigns are anti-Semitic in your view?
So I'm not going to speak to my view. First of all, just to clarify, the wording that's used here specifically, as you can see, is there's a footnote. This is from the ADL. That's what I'm saying.
It's copied and pasted from the ADL
100%.
statement. Well, not 100% because you're saying recognize. They say believe. The ADL expresses it as their opinion, and you're expressing it as fact.
Okay,
But can I just ask, since you're expressing it
Yes.
in your resolution that you wrote, can you tell me which of the strategies are anti-Semitic and which of them are not? Since you're saying, on the one hand, many of the strategies are anti-Semitic, on the other hand, there are people who support BDS who aren't anti-Semitic. Right. It would be helpful for those of us who are trying to avoid being labeled as anti-Semites in this town where we live to know which of the strategies you're talking about.
Sure. So I think that, and again, I would not say that this resolution is a perfect resolution. I think we've been working with so many different versions, so I'm not going to say this is the perfect resolution. But one of the things which we have said, and it was, we came to consensus on October 3rd, I think would define for you exactly what that is. When you have a movement such as BDS that ties the economic warfare against the state of Israel specifically to the destruction of the state of Israel, to deny its existence, to deny its legitimacy, and to deny the Jewish people's right to national self-determination, that is anti-Semitic.
But that's not a that's one of the, you're talking about the founding goals of the movement, which is the first clause of the sentence. The second clause of the sentence is about the strategies.
Jeff, I have to
You're not
interrupt for a
answering.
second. We're at the 3 minutes. If you want to come back up later, there'll be another
I think there's a lot more to
period.
clarify.
Thank you.
Please state your name and address.
Before I go, perhaps you'd like to, I
No, I
think you'd like to
can't.
hear the
I have
answer.
to, I have to let the next person go so that we have enough time for everybody.
We'll do that later.
Just state your name and address
My name is
first.
Ira Mintz. I live on North Fifth Avenue. First, I want to summarize the points in a letter to the council signed by 140 Highland Park residents that is supportive of a resolution focused on the core goal of combating anti-Semitism in our town, but it's opposed to a resolution that unfairly labels as anti-Semitic certain forms of criticism and protest of Israel in a way that suppresses free speech and protest. Our letter recognizes that the BDS movement is controversial and that many consider it extreme, but it's not inherently anti-Semitic. Instead, it is a
Please let the person speak. We need to be polite and let everyone have their say.
I hope that doesn't come out of my 3 minutes. It's a nonviolent protest movement supported by individuals and groups with diverse backgrounds and points of view. This includes many who are Jewish, as well as many who advocate in good faith for human rights causes all around the world. The letter continues that condemning BDS as an illegitimate form of protest in an official borough resolution is not fair, not right, and may not even be legal. The signers of the letter were concerned that the resolution will bring further controversy and litigation that will only worsen the fear and division in our town. Finally, the letter urges that rather than dividing our town with an aggressive stance on hotly disputed issues of international affairs, the council could pass a very simple resolution that responds to the specific acts of anti-Semitism our town has experienced, inspires with a message of healing, hope, and unity, and brings all of us together to combat and prevent hatred and bias here in Highland Park and in the United States. The letter concludes by asking the council to revise the resolution to accomplish these goals. That's not what the council has done. I want to end on a personal note. I was at the library during the Peace for Palestine program. I heard some members of our Jewish community screaming at other Jews that they were self-hating Jews and that they were anti-Semites. It was ugly, and this new resolution simply inflames those divisions within our community. But I also saw members of our community engaged in serious, non-confrontational discussions about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Our council should be encouraging those discussions, not joining with those engaged in an international campaign to label as anti-Semitic the views of some members of our community who are seeking a peaceful resolution to the decades-old conflict in the Middle East. You are not going to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in a council resolution. Better, you should spend your time addressing the problems right here in our community that you were elected to address. The problems of aging infrastructure, downtown redevelopment, racial discrimination, and yes, anti-Semitic acts in our local community. You should vote to table this resolution. Councilman Foster Dublin, you came in late. You should vote to table this resolution. Allow the Human Relations Commission to see it first and then to respond to it. Have educational programs in our community, and then, and only then, if our community reaches a consensus, should this council offer an opinion on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The resolution condemns the founding goals and strategies of the BDS movement. How many of our council members know what those strategies are, or which of those strategies are supposedly anti-Semitic?
Okay, so
One last sentence. Councilman Hale, you said we all agree anti-Semitism is unacceptable. Say that. You don't need to say more. You weren't elected to decide whose views on Israeli policies towards the Palestinians are racist or whose views are anti-Semitic.
You can come up later
you should
to
vote
finish.
to table.
Please state your name and address.
John Stern, Summit Place, Highland Park. I just wanted to say that I think as written, this resolution is very divisive. It's dividing our community rather than uniting it. I think the community would very much back a resolution against anti-Semitism. I think we all stand behind that. The paragraph about BDS bringing political issues, international political issues into this, I don't think is constructive, and I think it's dividing the community. If I were to want to make a political stance, let's say, against Saudi Arabia because of the way they treat women, and took action and political action to block that, I would hope nobody would consider that anti-Muslim. It wouldn't be. It would be anti-certain policies. And I think if we drop the two whereases to do with the BDS thing, I think everybody can come behind this resolution. They don't need to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry?
3 minutes left.
Okay, so you would be the last person to, unless you go for 10 seconds, I'm being told.
I could do this. 10 seconds it is. I'm
Okay.
Abital Levin. I live on North 4th Avenue. And on January 5th, 2018, after enjoying a snow day with our kids, playing in the snow, making snow angels, we went to sleep, woke up the next morning to find 5 swastikas drawn on our car and all over our walkway. We called the Highland Park police, who came and who reassured us that this concern would be taken very seriously and that our safety would be of utmost importance. Tonight, I will only be reassured if the language is passed with all of the language in it, and I thank Councilman Hale for helping to draft this. And I really implore and turn to all of you here to help me feel safe living in this community. And this is the only way I will feel safe. Thank you.
We have how much left?
2 minutes left.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. If you'd like to use those 2 minutes, you can. Please state your name and address.
So I'm Shmuel Green. I live in 38 South 4th Avenue. I'm one of the only parents who was actually in the reading of P.S. for Palestine, because, and I understand that I was labeled by the author as a Zionist father that was encouraging his son to ask questions. Yes, I encourage my kids to ask questions. That's what I do. That's why I was there. I'm all for free speech. I'm all for questions. Any type of questions, any type of speech. I'm not for lies. There were lies spoken in that room, and lies are spoken by BDS. One of the lies that I heard in that room was when my son asked for B is for Bethlehem, can Jews live in Bethlehem today? And she said, yes, Christians, Muslims, and Jews can live in Bethlehem. That is not true at all. If a Muslim, an Arab, sells land, a Palestinian sells land, property to a Jew in Bethlehem, they will be given a death sentence. If I walk in Bethlehem, the Israeli army will stop me from walking in Bethlehem, so I'm not killed. That is dangerous, and that is what BDS supports. I'm also here to read one of the petitions that was referred to. Please note that there are actually over 600 signatures on the site, but we have only reported the signatures here, 213 from Highland Park, 47 from Edison, that we could and the signatures are verified that they're from Highland Park residents and Edison residents. The petition says like this: we understand that the council is considering a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. We urge the council to include in that resolution a statement condemning the BDS movement as anti-Semitic. We do not question the right of any citizen to participate in a peaceful protest or boycott of any entity, just like I, with my kids, was at that event in order to promote free speech, truthful free speech, because lies kill. We do, however, recognize that the global BDS movement is a specific organization, one has specific originators, organizers, tactics, and goals. The specific BDS movement has made widespread use of anti-Semitic hate tropes and intimidation tactics. Somebody asked you what they do, I will tell you what they do. You can ask me later. Furthermore, they do not promote a peaceful negotiated two-state solution. Yes, I am aware of the fundamental parts and the fundamentals of BDS. They do not promote a two-state solution. They promote, their goal is to de-Gelamize Israel and to have one state that is not Jewish. That's what BDS stands for. The global BDS movement targeting Israel is a campaign that does not favor a two-state solution and undermines the possibility for a negotiated solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by demanding concessions of one party alone and encouraging the Palestinians to reject negotiations in favor of international pressure. The founder of the global BDS movement, Omar Barghouti, has denied the right of the Jewish people
Sorry, I
in the
have to
homeland.
cut you off because we're at the point. If you'd like to come up later, you can
I would
continue.
just say that there are signatures here, over 600, that demand and ask and implore to accept the resolution as is. Thank you.
All right, we're going to get back to the regular business portion, and there will be another public participation later on. I'm also making everyone aware that the resolution that we've been hearing about tonight has been separated from the consent agenda to allow for additional public comment regarding that one resolution, because I know there's a lot of concern about it. Okay, clerk, would you please report on the ordinance to prohibit the sale of dogs or cats from puppy mills for consideration of passage on first reading by title?
An ordinance to amend Chapter 114 of the Code of the Borough of Highland Park, 2010, to enact a new Article 4 to prohibit the sale of dogs or cats from puppy mills has been introduced in writing by council as a whole for consideration of passage on first reading by title.
Okay. May I have a motion to adopt or reject and advertise the ordinance on first reading by title?
Motion to adopt?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin,
Yes.
Councilman George,
Yes.
Councilman Hale,
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han,
Yes, thank you,
Councilwoman
Susan, for your work on
Walkovich.
this.
Yeah, just wanted to say that there's a serious problem in this country of people that own puppy mills. So basically, they're allowing dogs to have offspring, and they're not being well taken care of. They don't have homes. They wind up, and these puppy mills are not even necessarily in New Jersey, but they wind up in pet stores for sale, and oftentimes it's possible the pet store doesn't even realize where they're coming from, but they're raised in very inhumane environments, and we want to limit that. We don't want to limit any other kind of, legitimate dog breeders, so we just want to make it clear. And this was brought to us by the Humane Society, and yes.
Okay. Clerk, would you please report on introduction of the ordinance to amend and supplement Chapter 16 of the revised general ordinances to increase the quotation threshold for claims approval for consideration of passage on first reading by title?
An ordinance to amend and supplement the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Highland Park, Chapter 16, claims approval has been introduced in writing by council as a whole for consideration of passage on first reading by title.
Okay, may I have a motion to adopt or reject and advertise the ordinance on first reading by title?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilman Fine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Yes.
Councilman George,
Yes.
Councilman Hale,
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han,
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz.
Yes.
All right. May I have a motion to adopt consent agenda items 13 through 36?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Yes.
Councilman George,
Just a note for the public that a number of the resolutions on the consent agenda, if you read it, we are moving forward with our solutions to water and sewer problems by moving forward with some of the issues that were discussed at the recent public meetings and trying to get a hold of this and not let it slide anymore and not push it down the road anymore before the mains break and wash the roads out like they do in Hoboken. I vote yes.
Councilman Hale?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han?
Yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Yes.
Okay. May I have a motion to adopt or reject the draft resolution agreed upon by the council on October 3rd, 2019, to be considered by council for adoption at this meeting?
So, well, I'd like to make a motion ultimately to consider for adoption the substituted resolution which we read into the record during our 6:30 working session. My understanding is that the proper procedural method is to first take up what this council agreed to by consensus. Every member of the council agreed to the wording of the October 3rd resolution. And what I'd like to do for that is to move to reject that resolution from October 3rd and take up the ultimately take up the resolution that we discussed at our working session this evening.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. Do I do a roll call? May I roll call, please, on rejecting the resolution that was discussed at our October 3rd meeting?
Councilman Fine?
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin?
Yes.
Councilman George?
Yes.
Councilman Hale?
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han?
Yes, and then we're going to vote separately for this
Yes.
one, right? Okay, yes.
Councilwoman Welkowitz?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Councilman Fine made a motion to replace this previous resolution with the one that was discussed on the agenda portion of our meeting tonight. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilman Fine?
No, wait.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
What, Ed, am I doing something incorrectly?
We first need to have public discussion.
Ah, yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
So we rejected that one, then we had public discussion.
Yes, we rejected the other one. Now, the
If
the
you like,
new.
Mayor, I'll make a motion now.
Okay.
A motion to put on the floor the resolution which was discussed at the working session tonight. And I would actually like, if it's okay, to read it, because I know this is tonight is, people came with the knowledge of the resolution, the draft resolution, which we had put up on the website. It was the resolution that where the language was agreed to by consensus by all council members on October 3rd. But because of the change, I know some people may have a copy, some people may not. So I'm going to read it out. And this is what I like to put up for consideration. And if there's a second, then we'll move to public discussion. So it's the Borough of Highland Park, number 10-19-317, resolution condemning all forms of anti-Semitism. Whereas the mayor and council recognize that anti-Semitism today is being promoted by individuals and groups at both ends of the political spectrum. And whereas Jewish citizens and residents of Highland Park are experiencing a significant increase in anti-Semitic incidents, including several incidents of anti-Semitic harassment of individuals on the street, property destruction, and hate speech. And whereas the Highland Park Borough Council is aware of the rise of incidents of bias, hate speech, and discriminatory behaviors that have impacted our Highland Park youth in our schools, on social media, and that hate speech groups are targeting our school-age children with messages of hate and sowing division and anti-Semitism among them. And whereas we commend New Jersey's acting governor, Sheila Oliver, for issuing Executive Order number 78 on August 7, 2019, which establishes an interagency task force to provide advice and recommendations to the offices of the governor and the attorney general and to other state agencies on strategies and actions to reduce incidents of hate, bias, and intolerance involving students and young adults in our schools. And whereas we acknowledge that following the attacks on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh and the Chabad of Poway in San Diego by white supremacists, synagogues in Highland Park were forced to reevaluate their own security measures to keep their congregations safe. And whereas the mayor and council recognize attempts in both our nation and our community to demonize, dehumanize, and delegitimize Jews anywhere in the world is a form of anti-Semitism. And whereas the mayor and council recognize that the founding goals of the global boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS movement, and many of the strategies used by BDS campaigns are anti-Semitic. While there are people who support BDS but are not anti-Semitic, the mayor and council recognize that the campaign is founded on a rejection of Israel's very existence as a Jewish state. It denies the Jewish people the right to self-determination, a right universally afforded to other groups. In the mayor and council's view, this differs from legitimate criticism of Israel and is anti-Semitic. And whereas the mayor and council recognize the constitutional right of United States citizens to free speech, including the right to protest or criticize the policies of the United States or foreign governments. Now therefore be it resolved that the mayor and council of the Borough of Highland Park condemn all forms of anti-Semitism. And further, be it resolved that the mayor and council will work through the Human Relations Commission to have the Anti-Defamation League, faith-based organizations, and other knowledgeable parties to provide significant and sustained programming they have developed to educate our community about all aspects of anti-Semitism and combat its continued spread. So now that I've read that, I'd like to make a motion to have this resolution considered for adoption by the council.
Point of order, is the motion taken up before public comment or after?
All we need is a second to the motion, and then we go to public comment. Then you would vote after the public comment.
Okay.
I second the motion.
Okay, now you can go
Okay.
to public comment.
I'm opening this up to public comment. I do want to ask, because I know there's a long line of people waiting to talk, that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and that hopefully everyone will be complete with their comments at 8:30. If there are still a lot of people standing up, I will extend that for another 15 minutes. Okay, please state your name and address.
Sam Friedman, Lawrence Avenue. I want to start by thanking the library for its support for free speech. And I want to thank the police for the very good job they did while we had the library presentations. I, in the past, attacked the police for some of the racist acts they've taken, but in this case, I want to thank them. I also want to point out, in sympathy with the woman who had the swastikas and was afraid, that on Fifth Avenue during that day, not merely were people calling people self-hating Jews, they were, in the context of having supported Trump, and doing chants for Trump, shouting obscenities at Palestinians on the other side of the street. And if you want to talk about being afraid, since I was probably the first person opposed to them who was there, because I was waiting for the speaker to help her get in safely, I felt afraid, and I was right to feel afraid. And it's only the action of the police probably that kept some of those haters from attacking Palestinians and people like me. So when we're talking about activities of a kind, some people will call Palestinians Semitic. For those people, this would be an anti-Semitic action. This motion has simple misstatements of fact in it. Have you ever heard of the Kurds? Have they not had their right of self-determination denied? This denies that. It erases Palestinians. I talked to Elsie after the last meeting and asked about how many conversations had you had to get the Palestinian perspective on this and this motion as it looked at that time. And she said, you hadn't. You've erased their views. You've erased their right to their national homeland by saying Jewish people have it. You have erased non-Zionist Jews for whom Israel is not our state, and we consider its statements that it is to be an absolute obscenity and denial of our right of self-determination. This particular motion keeps changing every time I see it, and fundamentally, you have to consider one other thing. If it passes, what kinds of reactions is it going to cause that are going to exacerbate this division? Because it will.
Sam, it's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Melanie McDermott, and I live at 330 South 3rd Avenue. This resolution represents a misuse of local government that would divide the community, suppress legitimate free speech, affront and demean me, along with my friends and family, as an anti-Semite, thereby alienating us from civic life and leaving me personally no choice but to resign from my borough appointment. I would abstain rather than ever vote again for any of you who would vote in favor of the resolution as presently worded. If its purpose is to misappropriate the power and platform of municipal government in order to advance a political agenda to oppose and suppress the boycott, divest, sanctions movement, and to, by extension, label all appointments of the current Israeli government and all supporters of Palestinian civil rights as anti-Semitic, then I unreservedly oppose it. It should be voted down and not amended. I had some other remarks that were prepared in response to the last issue. I am extremely sympathetic and very concerned about the statements of my fellow townsperson who experienced the anti-Semitic incidents of the swastika. This is what we need to hear about, and this is what we need to discuss. What this will do is shut off the potential for discussion. It is not the job of, I did not elect you to represent my views on foreign policy, nor to on protest movements. It is, please back off from the precipice. The debate in this room has made it clear, you cannot make this happy. None of us here are experts on BDS. None of us are here experts, and whether we are or not, it's not our job to resolve that. Please pass a clean resolution that says that people of Highland Park are united in our opposition to anti-Semitism, that we will stand by each other and defend each other from the risk, the very real risk of white nationalism. Please allow us to have this conversation without making threats. Without making threats about if you don't pass it, you don't represent me, because you can't win, because you're not going to represent both me and the other speaker. Done. End of story. That should tell you right there this is a bad idea. Please pass a clean resolution. Thank you.
Herb Gross, Adelaide Gardens. First, I would like to say I have listened to every man and woman that has come up to this microphone to speak, and I respect your criticisms and I respect your comments. But please listen to what I have to say. I have not heard one person, man or woman, come up to this microphone and say to our wonderful congressmen and women on both sides of the aisle, and our wonderful United States senators, men and women on both sides of the aisle, I have not heard one person come up to this microphone and say thank you for supporting Israel. The President of the United States, past, present, and the future, is governed by our congressmen and our senators. I'm at loss for a few words, but I am well aware. I am a veteran, and again, I am well aware of the military significance that the President of the United States and our military chiefs will defend Israel right down the line. I pity any nation that attacks Israel. I am forbidden to speak about our weapons and our military situation, but I have seen and I have used our military hardware, and I pity the country that would attack Israel. Again, I say, have a little respect for our congressmen and our senators. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Boris. I'm at 1158 Raritan Avenue, Highland Park. Is it possible to ask one of the previous speakers a question or just a general statement, I guess? A statement has been made that it's outside of the purview of the council to speak on international affairs or things outside of the purview of Highland Park. And to those people that recently said that, I asked, did you say the same thing when the council made a resolution against racist remark against Mexico and or Mexicans, back when they did? Did you make the same statements when the council made a resolution against the Muslim ban happening that targets a specific race and ethnicity and religion? Did anyone here that's opposing to this resolution make those statements? Yeah, some of them did. Did anyone make the same statements during, and with request to the other person that said not enough input has been made from the other side, when the council made a resolution against the shootings in Pittsburgh last year? Was any request for comment from the neo-Nazis that would support said shooting done? And I hope not, because when things are objectively wrong, sometimes you don't need to hear both sides. So the only question remains, is the BDS movement objectively wrong? So I would ask a question. Is killing Jews objectively wrong or anti-Semitic? I hope everyone here agrees. Is disenfranchising Jews on the basis of their Judaism inherently anti-Semitic? I hope everyone here agrees. So does the BDS movement do those things? A few quotes from the founder and current leader of the global boycott, divestment, sanctions leader, Omar Barghouti. The one-state solution means a unitary state, where, by definitions, Jews will be a minority. And a one-state solution is his stated goal of the BDS movement. I am completely and categorically against binationalism, because it assumes that there are two nations with equal moral claims to the land. Again, Omar Barghouti, the leader of the BDS movement. If the refugees were to return, you would not have a two-state solution. You'd have a Palestine next to a Palestine. So that is the goal of the BDS movement, disenfranchisement of Jews. Now, in opposed to actual violence, so many people here and sometimes in the past during these meetings mentioned that the BDS movement is nonviolent. And that is categorically false. The tools that they use are nonviolent. Boycott, divestment, sanctions, used by legitimate civil rights movements throughout the world, throughout the centuries. However, the goals that they're using them towards are the destruction of Israel, as they said in this plainly. The three terms that they say that under which BDS will stop is full return of 10 million plus refugees, which cannot be traced, are unique to the Palestinians because generational refugees are not happen with any other ethnic group in the world or timeline. They are integrated into other societies and countries, just like, let's say, Germany recently reintegrated Syrians. They have to do complete borders, which are against international laws, with zero transfers, with zero questions of Jewish sovereignty and or historicity. And if these demands are not met, then that means boycotts, divestments, and sanctions until they are. And
Boris, I have to stop you.
One last thing. What happens when Israel runs out of money to buy Iron Dome missiles? That is the question that anyone here that does not support this resolution, I want you to answer that question.
Okay,
What happened?
Boris, thank you. Please
Thank
state
you.
your name and address.
Josh Brzezinski, North 10th Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey. First, I'd like to thank again Chief Abrams, Captain Corbello, Detective McGraw, and the entire HPPD for doing a wonderful job at the library protest Sunday, October 20th. Once again, they kept everyone safe and let everyone say what had to be said. I also want to mention something. A previous speaker spoke, and she was very passionate about anti-Semitism, and then she mentioned that we're against white supremacists. Now, I want you to know I'm against white supremacism also, and I'm against anti-Semitism, but we must understand that anti-Semitism is not a question of left, it's not a question of right, it's a question of wrong. And it's disgusting, it's racist, it's harmful to the Jews of America and all over the world. And we've been spending 2,000 years through history experiencing anti-Semitism. So let's not make this a political discussion, let's make this a discussion on the facts. I'd like to talk about a petition that we submitted today to the Mayor and Council, signed by 286 residents of Highland Park. I'll just say a few paragraphs from here. You all have it. You can see it. Is BDS anti-Semitic? This is from the ADL website. Many of the founding goals of the BDS movement, including denying the Jewish people the universal right of self-determination, along with many of the strategies employed in BDS campaigns, are anti-Semitic. Many individuals involved in BDS campaigns are driven by opposition to Israel's very existence as a Jewish state. Oftentimes, BDS campaigns give rise to tensions in communities, particularly on college campuses, that can result in harassment or intimidation of Jews and Israel supporters, including overt anti-Semitic expression and acts. This dynamic can create an environment in which anti-Semitism can be expressed more freely. And all too often, BDS advocates employ anti-Semitic rhetoric and narratives to isolate and demonize Israel. Is that the result we want here in Highland Park, that people should be afraid to walk the streets because BDS is coming to our town? What does the ADL website say about JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, which was the group that brought the speaker, Goldberg Bashi, to our library and started this whole thing in the first place and caused this town to be split apart? Jewish Voice for Peace is a radical anti-Israel activist group that advocates for a complete economic, cultural, and academic boycott of the state of Israel. JVP rejects the view that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a tragic dispute over land, and which has been perpetuated by a cycle of violence, fear, and distrust on both sides, in favor of the belief that Israeli policies and actions are motivated by deeply rooted Jewish radical chauvinism and religious supremacism. More troubling, JVP's dissemination of the view that Israel and its U.S. supporters are fundamentally racist oppressors of non-Jews has the effect of perpetuating the classic anti-Jewish stereotype of Jews as self-centered elitists, disdainful of non-Jews who are focused on their own interests, sometimes at others' expense. Additionally, JVP's ongoing insistence that virtually all criticism of Israel cannot be anti-Semitic gives cover to anti-Semites who couch their malice towards Jews as mere anti-Zionism.
Excuse me, Josh, it's 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And it was signed by 286 residents of Highland Park. Thank you.
Please state your name and address.
Hi, good evening, folks. Jeffrey Schreiber, 208 Lincoln Avenue in Highland Park. It's no accident that the Holocaust began with German boycotts of Jewish businesses. And the BDS movement is really just an extension of that. In fact, it's quite symbolic that in May of this year, the German Bundestag passed a resolution in which it recognized that the BDS movement is, in fact, anti-Semitic. Why is it anti-Semitic? It's anti-Semitic because it singles out the only free country in the Middle East and North Africa, other than Tunisia, which is partly free, the only country that embodies our ideals of democratic values in action, that provides equal rights to all of its citizens, regardless of their race, their gender, their religion, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation. And it singles that country out for opprobrium. That, when you do that to the only Jewish country in the world, and there's no BDS movement by any people here who are advocating for BDS, of countries that rank well below on the scale of freedom then you have to look at whether what is driving people is anti-Semitism. And when this town gave a platform on a municipal organization like our library to someone who says that Israel is a thieving, child-murdering European colony, simultaneously managing to repeat calumnies against Israel, to deny the Jewish right to self-determination in the land and the Jewish connection to that land that lasts for 4 millennia, it's important for the town, for the municipality, to take a stand on what that woman stood for, which is the BDS movement. So while ordinarily I would say, yes, perhaps the tiny town of Highland Park has no reason to take stands on foreign affairs, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when you, unfortunately, and me, my government, gave a platform to an avowed anti-Semite, that's just one of the many things she said on Twitter, to espouse her dangerous and disgusting anti-Semitism, which is done through the BDS movement. So congratulations to you for considering this resolution. I urge you strongly to pass it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak?
Hey.
Okay, Matt, we're at 3.
Yeah, there's a lot of people behind me, too.
Oh, okay, okay. Just remember, we're at 3 minutes a person.
Yes, Mayor. If I need an extension, may I ask for one?
You can come back up later.
Oh, okay. All right. I am the. My name is Matthew Hirsch, 333 Felton Avenue. I am here representing the Highland Park Equity Commission. I'm the Human Relations Commission designate to the Equity Commission, and the Equity Commission expresses deep concern for the Highland Park for Highland Park Borough Council's proposed resolution condemning all forms of anti-Semitism, based not on the title or perceived spirit of the measure, but because of its persistent labeling of residents with particular geopolitical beliefs as anti-Semitic. Members of the Equity Commission hold that local government's job is to bring people together of disparate beliefs, backgrounds, worldviews, and cultures for a common community cause. Its role should be to establish a culture where residents are not marginalized, disengaged, or suppressed from participating in civic life. While this resolution makes an attempt to condemn all forms of anti-Semitism, particularly in light of several recent disturbing and unacceptable anti-Semitic acts in Highland Park and around the country, it falls far short in its community-building intent. Instead, the resolution redefines what type of dissent is and isn't acceptable. It embraces legitimate protest that seeks, quote, racial justice and social change and promoted coexistence, civil rights, and political reconciliation. To this end, the Equity Commission agrees. But the resolution quickly pivots, dismissing global economic sanctions as economic warfare, at least the version that we reviewed. We have not reviewed the one that's up for consideration right now, against the state of Israel. This is an intentionally and thinly veiled nod toward the so-called BDS movement, which is described as a Palestinian-led campaign promoting various forms of boycott against Israel until its government meets certain stated conditions. The Equity Commission believes this intentional pivot is in response to the Highland Park Public Library's invitation to a book author, Iranian Studies Rutgers professor Golbarg Bashi, last spring to read her children's book, P is for Palestine. Published media reports have indicated that Dr. Bashi is a supporter of BDS. The Equity Commission recognizes that Highland Park's Orthodox community and members of other communities are targeted with hate, bias, and intolerance. It's not within the purview of the Equity Commission to gauge the legitimacy of those experiences, but rather to examine them and work toward a community-wide solution. This resolution does not do that, and we worry that it does the opposite. Many members of our community feel an existential threat by BDS, and Jews around the globe have every reason to watch for the red flags of history amid a rising tide of anti-Semitism. But for a local government to conflate an extreme reading of BDS, where anti-Semitism does indeed exist, with local residents' humanitarian concerns around the globe, is dangerous and irresponsible. I've said it before. There's a difference between criticizing a domestic or foreign government and calling for the elimination of a people and a sovereign state. There's a difference between having concern for people or people in danger on a humanitarian level, which is our tradition in Highland Park, and having foreign borders dictate what's right and what's wrong, especially if we're not educated about those issues. Councilman Hale. The Equity Commission does not have a stance on BDS, nor will it render one.
Matt, I'm going to have to stop you. You're more than welcome to come up later, but we have to give each person the same amount of time.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Hey, stop. I cannot let one person go for. Go ahead. Ethan, please state your name and address.
Ethan Schoolman, North 4th Street. I have a question for Councilman Hale. You expressed a bit of confidence that this current draft, which all of us just saw this evening for the first time, apparently some of your colleagues on council saw it when they sat down this evening for the first time. You expressed confidence that this resolution addresses the concerns of the community that you've heard in your email and personal interactions. You've already told our colleague Jeff Vardaro that you haven't talked about this with the Highland Park commissions that were charged with giving you advice on this sort of thing. I wonder who else you've heard from in the time when you finished this resolution, perhaps earlier today, and when you announced it to us, that have given you confidence that this is it, this is the one. After 7 months, you've done it. Who have you talked to give you that confidence?
I think that the process has been filled with conversations from across the spectrum. There's been conversations, there's been
So after
input from the
seven
HRC.
months and repeated...
Let him talk, and then you can...
Okay. Please,
So
briefly, just answer the question. Have you
I
talked
just
with
did,
anyone
I think.
tonight?
So yes, I think that there has been discussion and discussion and discussion about this issue, and I think it is time for us to act based on the discussion that we've had for the last several months.
So you seem to have quite a bit of faith that this resolution addresses the concerns of the community. That was the sentiment you expressed. I would suggest, based on the crowd here today and the passions, that your faith and your abilities to assess the concerns of the community may be misplaced in this instance. And if the rest of the council believes that you've made a good choice in trusting Councilman Hale, perhaps Councilman Fine, in writing a resolution that satisfies our entire diverse community, that will pacify our community, answer our concerns, and condemn anti-Semitism in a way that unifies. If you have trusted these council members to help you with that, in this instance, I think your faith and trust may also have been misplaced. If you want a resolution that unifies the community, talk to the community to get it. Have community meetings, work through the commissions, do not have a secretive process, and do not launch a final draft in the final minutes of a council meeting and expect this will unite Highland Park. It will do just the opposite. The responsible decision for peace, justice, tolerance, and frankly the American way is to table this tonight, revise it, make it a clean resolution, or ask the community to write a much, much, much better one. Thank you.
Thank you. David, I'm noticing some tall people having to bend. You may want to raise that. Thank you.
David Hughes, 330 South 3rd Avenue. I want to begin by noting that we're holding this meeting on Lenape ancestral land. And I want to draw attention to the Clause 7, which I find to be reprehensible and nonsensical. It refers to, it defines as anti-Semitic the denying of the Jewish people the right to self-determination, a right universally afforded to other groups. That's not true. The Kurds do not have self-determination. The Tibetans do not have self-determination. Kashmiris do not have self-determination. Catalans have been in the news in Barcelona demanding self-determination, and they don't have it. I wonder if we're going to write resolutions against Madrid for denying the Catalans their self-determination. Mohawks and Navajos do not have self-determination, and the Lenape certainly do not have self-determination. You are sitting there, by sitting there, you are denying the Lenape their self-determination. So let me imagine a scenario. If we embrace the principle of self-determination as universal, let's prepare ourselves for Lenape to rise up, it's say in 2048, come here, settle, get some allies, wage a war, we fight, we lose, we wind up in a refugee camp in Pennsylvania, and we complain about it, and people call us racist, okay? I don't think you like that scenario. I don't think you would feel comfortable sitting in Pennsylvania because of the universal principle of self-determination, which means that you don't actually believe in self-determination as a principle or as a right. You believe, and I'm pointing to all of you in the expectation that some of you will vote for this, but I'm really addressing my point to you, Matt, and to you, Josh, and to everybody who's spoken in favor of this resolution. You don't believe in self-determination as a right. You believe in it as a privilege for people who've been able to act upon it by doing one thing. And I use the privilege in this very narrow sense. This is the privilege of making Arabs pay for what Nazis did. That is what happened in 1948, and that is a privilege. And I am going to speak against it, and I'm going to continue speaking against it. And if you want to call me anti-Semitic for it, you're going to take the sting away from that insult. And you better watch it. If you use the anti-Semitic label too broadly, eventually the people accused of being anti-Semitic for supporting Palestinian rights, we're just going to own it. And that's a really bad day.
Okay, okay. Okay, John. Listen. There are a lot of different points of view being expressed today. Please, we're not going to agree with one another on everything here tonight, but please be respectful of each other's point of view. Please state your name and address.
I'm Hava Friedreich. I live at 62 Grant Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey. I am a Jew and I am a Zionist. There is inevitable overlap between Judaism and Zionism. 6.5 million Jews live in Israel, more than in any other country. Those that call for the destruction of the Jews in Israel are calling for another Holocaust. I don't know where they think those people are going to go. Jews throughout the world pray facing Israel. It is a fundamental part of our heritage. I'm trying not to yell or scream or get upset. When my kids go to school every day, they say the Pledge of Allegiance and they sing the Jewish national anthem of Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem, because they're Jews and that's what we do. When we are in synagogue, we say a special prayer for the government of the United States, for the Borough Council, and then we say a special prayer for the government of Israel. We celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, in the streets of this town. While there are different Jews with different opinions on how the modern state of Israel relates to our Zionist ideas, the idea that Israel is our ancestral homeland is universal. So inevitably, our ancestral homeland, I didn't say we all agree it's our future homeland, but the archaeological evidence is undeniable. Factually, it is our ancestral homeland. Therefore, there is an inevitable overlap between anti-Zionism and anti-Judaism or anti-Semitism when Zionism and Judaism are so incredibly linked. We might disagree about where to draw the line, about where legitimate criticisms of the state of Israel, and trust me, I have plenty of my own legitimate criticisms of the state of Israel. Israel's a democracy. It's okay to criticize it. It's okay to have opinions. That's what makes it one of the greatest countries in the Middle East, because it is the country where you won't be shot for your opinion. It is the country where Arabs have equal rights, Israeli Arabs, I understand, not Palestinian Arabs, have equal right to vote and representations. Where all nationalities and religions can pray and practice their religions freely. But there is a point where criticism becomes anti-Semitism. When you start to defame Israelis with lies and slurs, using find and replace in old anti-Semitic tropes, replacing Jew with Israeli or Jew with Zionist, you can't do that. So it is very important to me that when we have a resolution against anti-Semitism, it addresses that inevitable overlap between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism and defines where that line is. I hope we all agree that that line exists, and it's just a question of how we define it. Is the language in tonight's resolution the best way to define that line? It's not what I personally would have written, but I'll take it if that's what the council can pass. I'll take the October 3rd one, too.
It's 3 minutes.
One sentence, please. I don't feel threatened by white nationalists in Highland Park. I know that as a Jew, I will be defended. But will you defend me as an Israeli?
Please state your name and address.
Andrew Getrayer, 801 South 2nd Avenue. I want to urge the council to vote in favor of this resolution. One of the speakers earlier tonight said that if you just take out the section about BDS, then we all could unite in condemning all forms of anti-Semitism. And I wish that that were true. But what that person and others do not recognize is that to the vast majority of the American Jewish community and the vast majority of the Highland Park Jewish community, BDS is a form of anti-Semitism. And it's not my opinion. It can be represented by actual data. First of all, we have every rabbi in this town Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform, who have come together to urge you to accept this resolution, including BDS. That does not happen on a regular basis, that all of the rabbis in our community agree on anything. But they represent thousands of people in this community, and they're united. I think we've made a mistake in arguing the details of BDS and whether it is anti-Semitic or not, because what is a fact is that 82% of American Jews believe that BDS is a form of anti-Semitism, and I'm referencing a study that came out last week from the American Jewish Committee, which I forwarded to everybody here on this council. 82% of American Jews don't agree on anything. 82% of American Jews don't fast on Yom Kippur. 82% of American Jews don't have a Passover Seder. 82% of American Jews do not observe Shabbat at all. This is a remarkable thing, and it is because we experience BDS, however it is intended, as an existential attack on us as Jews, delegitimizing our position in American society and in our Highland Park community. If you were to ask somebody who supports BDS, are you an anti-Semite or not an anti-Semite, and they're going to say, I'm not an anti-Semite, and I believe that many of you who support BDS do not do it out of anti-Semitism. You do it because you sincerely believe that you are, that it is just. But what I want you to understand, what I want this council to understand, is the way, whatever you believe you're doing, it is experienced by us in a totally different way. Just as I have white friends who believe in certain, say, policies regarding drug enforcement or the penal system, who say they're not racist. It just happens that racism occurs because of the policies they support. I have friends who are very supportive of certain immigration policies who say they're not racist. It just happens that the immigration policy has Islamophobic or anti-Latino elements to it. And BDS is the same way. I have friends, I hope they're friends, I know they're neighbors, who support BDS and say they're not anti-Semitic. And I say, you may not feel like you are anti-Semitic, but what you're doing has an anti-Semitic effect, and it is felt by the vast majority of the Jewish community as anti-Semitism. And if this council sincerely wants to condemn anti-Semitism in all its forms, it must include a reference to BDS. And if you do not, you will be sending a message to all of us in this Jewish community, or at least 82% of us, that you do not care about our fears and our concerns. Thank you very much.
Dan Stern, Cardinal, Harper Street. I just want to express my profound disappointment with I've never witnessed rancor in this town like I've seen for the last month, maybe 6 weeks. I mean, the things that people have said to each other are astounding. And some of you that have said these things are in this room. You know who you are, and have said them to other people in this room. And it's just profoundly disappointing. And at the end of the day, the blame for that lies with the Borough Council. It would have been trivially easy to craft a resolution that everybody in this room could get behind and would not lead to any accusations of anti-Semitism or any instances of actual anti-Semitism propagating, for example, on Highland Park's official Facebook page. But instead, we went the route that we did, which any four of you could have stopped at any point over the last 6 weeks by saying, I am not going to support this resolution in this form. Instead, it has to be more broadly acceptable. But instead, here we are tonight. I don't know if this resolution is going to pass or not. If it does, I hope you're satisfied with this outcome and you're pleased with where this resolution has led us as a town. Thank you.
Hi, I'm a little bit shorter, sorry. I'm Mark Colton, 41 North 8th Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey. So I'm finding this discussion this evening rather bizarre. I'm hearing a lot of discussion about BDS, a lot of geopolitics, a lot of interesting stuff. I hear, and I agree, that the council probably is not in the best position and not experts able to define anti-Semitism or what BDS is all about or any of those kinds of things. And here we have all these people in this room getting all exercised about things the council obviously knows nothing about, it would seem. However, it's quite interesting that there's one accepted definition globally of what anti-Semitism is. The International Holocaust Remembrance Association Alliance has come out with a definition. You can't get the U.S. Congress to agree on anything, but they agreed overwhelmingly that this is the definition of anti-Semitism. And quite amazingly, you can't get the United Nations to accept anything regarding Israel, but yet they came up with a report from Special Rapporteur what anti-Semitism is. And it's quite interesting that the Special Rapporteur, who's an Arab, came out with a statement in the official 49-page document about anti-Semitism, which says, the Special Rapporteur further notes, claims that the objectives, activities, and effects of the boycott, divestment, sanctions, BDS moves are fundamentally anti-Semitic. It's really difficult. We have Germany, Austria, the Czech Republic, Hungary, all of which have histories with Nazism, and they all agree with the definition of anti-Semitism. You have the denominational rabbis in this neighborhood, as pointed out earlier, who agree on nothing related to religion, certainly, but they agree what anti-Semitism is and how it's defined. You can't have the whole world agree on what the definition is and say we in Highland Park want to re-debate what that definition is and how it should be articulated. There's one definition. We're not debating the Middle East. We're not debating Israel. We're not debating any of that. And if you want to understand what the implications are in terms of Highland Park, well, let's say delegitimization. I'll be finished momentarily. The double negative is a positive. So you legitimize the destruction of Israel. Are we prepared to say that Jews who are living in Israel should be destroyed? And knowing what goes on in the Middle East, if you dehumanize, well, that means anybody here that supports their fellow co-religionists are targeted. So if you're in favor of destruction of Israel, that's okay. It's not anti-Semitism. And if you're in favor of targeting Jews in Highland Park who support Jews in Israel, then it's legitimate and it's not anti-Semitic either, because a double negative is a positive. We have definitions. It's by the Congress, it's by the UN, it's by every country in the world.
Mark,
period.
it's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Jeff Ardaro, Wayne Street. I just want to start by noting it's not accurate that the UN has condemned BDS as anti-Semitic. If you read the report, that's not what it says. I doubt that the members of the council have all read that report. I'm guessing that you're hearing from a lot of people in Highland Park that the UN has condemned BDS as anti-Semitic. It's not true. It's not accurate. I'm sorry.
No, please, let the person who's talking speak, please.
But I want to go back to what I was asking about earlier. I mean, I didn't get a particularly satisfactory answer from Councilman Fine, so I'll ask you, Council President George, do you have an explanation for the people in the borough?
For 1 second. I think I was cut off before to giving you an answer, so I was hoping.
Go ahead. Which of the strategies? I'll ask it a different way. Which of the strategies used by BDS campaigns are not anti-Semitic? If you could give us a list of those, that would be also helpful so that we can avoid being anti-Semitic under the borough's new definition if this passes.
To your question about strategies, I think a couple of items would be, number one, the using of anti-Semitic tropes and memes in its messaging, the intimidation tactics that go along with that, and the third would be focusing on delegitimizing Israel, delegitimizing the Jewish people by not and basically seeking to single out Israel and only looking for a one-state solution. Those would be some of the tactics that are used, the intimidation tactics and the anti-Semitic tropes to that end.
Well, a lot of those I think would fit better under goals than strategies, but I still think it's a little bit vague, and I don't think the council can possibly have a good understanding of what those strategies are after 1 day of consideration in this process. I will say I have been saddened by this process throughout on the substance, but up until today I was ready to say, despite the work that I did in the primary campaign this spring, criticizing the council for transparency and openness, I was saying to myself, This has been a transparent and open process. We've been able to debate things. We've vetted things through the Human Relations Commission. We've vetted things. The Equity Commission had an opportunity to discuss what was previously posted. Now, I have to say, congratulations. The one thing good that I could say about this process is no longer true. This is not transparent. This is not open. You cannot post something on the borough website 3 or 4 days ago for everybody to consider and react to, and then switch it at the last minute to something else that you're prepared to vote on and pass without going through the commissions, without getting feedback from the people who have volunteered to do this. I don't think it's a good process. I don't think it's fair. I would urge the council to table this resolution so that you can all have a consensus about which strategies they are, and maybe list them in the resolution rather than just giving these vague definitions, substituting a paraphrased version of the ADL's language for your own language as if it was your own. I don't think this is a good process, and I think at a certain point, leadership is not always taking decisive action on an issue. Sometimes leadership means saying, enough is enough. We've spent a lot of time talking about this. We are never going to reach consensus. This resolution is not going to reach its goal of unifying the community against anti-Semitism. In fact, it's doing exactly the opposite. And we're not going to succeed in this process. Leadership means saying, no, we do not need to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Gordon, 207 South Fifth Avenue. I was thinking on the ride to work today and home today that if you would sit in my car, you would hear the most eloquent speech I could give, great, arguments, pro and con, but then I get to work and I forget it all. But you've heard all of us talk for 7 months now. You've saw all the links. You've been sent every petition. You've sent every article, one side or the other. But no one's addressed how's it going to affect Highland Park. And if you know the people I've spoken to privately, on the phone, in person, through email, I'm concerned about how it's going to affect Highland Park today. This past Passover, a Jewish man, a visibly Jewish man who's wearing a yarmulke, was walking on Raritan, and a man ran out of a restaurant and yelled at him and said, "Why are you killing babies in Gaza?" Now, he doesn't know if that man is a BDS supporter. He doesn't know if he's liberal, conservative. He doesn't know where he comes from, but he right away assumed, because he was Jewish, he was a Zionist, as I've learned this past week. I grew up that Zionist is a proud term, and I'm proud to be a Zionist. But I was told this week that I'm a racist, violent Zionist because I support the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Well, guess what? I take Zionist as proud. Not violent and racist. I think the only time I was violent in my life is when I punched a kid in the face in East Brunswick High School for calling me a kike. And guess what? They learned not to call me that word again, and that's fine. So I'm not a violent set. But going back to how does it affect Highland Park? Well, the BDS movement and their supporters, again, I'm not accusing anyone in this community. As someone said, I'm not judging who's anti-Semitic, who's racist, who's Islamophobic, who's homophobic. That's not for me to decide. I go by actions. And what we're seeing is the BDS movement has infiltrated almost every progressive movement. I have here Linda Sosora says, no, you can't be a Zionist and a feminist. Thankfully, she was removed from the position of the Women's March leadership. There's something called pinkwashing. Pinkwashing is when Zionists say, we support gay rights. Israel, Tel Aviv is one of the most gay cities, LGBT-free cities in the world. They say, no, now you're pinkwashing. And here's a poster that says, Free Palestine, cancel pinkwashing. This one concerns incarceration in the United States, and it says, imprisoned resistance, politics of incarceration in Palestine in the U.S. Climate change, against the inclusion of Zionist organization in the climate march. New York City, no climate change without justice for Palestine. Now we're getting closer. I know in this community we have a lot of affinity for the immigration community. We want for immigration reform. We're going to have a march, I think, on Sunday through town. Well, guess what? This was at a banner in New York City. From Palestine to Mexico, all the walls have to go. So if you're for immigration reform and you're a Zionist, you're not welcomed anymore.
We're at 3 minutes.
Oh, Do I get credit for the clapping? No, okay. My point is, real quick, in Princeton, there was a meeting of Black Lives Matters and Palestinian solidarity. If I'm against racism, I'm for immigration reform, I'm for women's rights, I'm for LGBT rights, but I'm a Zionist, I'm no longer welcome in these communities. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen in Highland Park. It's not happening today yet. The library with free speech, Free Palestine was the first step. Thank you very much, Council.
Can I ask, how many more people are lined up? Can you give me an idea? 4? 5? Okay, so 5 times 3, 15 minutes. We're going to stop at 9 o'clock, so, please limit your, sorry? Okay.
I think we wait to see how many people.
Can I take
I
it
just
out?
asked. There were only 4. So if there are 4 people waiting, and if each person can please limit themselves to 3 minutes, we'll be able to stick close to that 9 o'clock. So I'm asking for your help on that.
Okay, my name is Ellen Witt. I live on First Avenue. I'm very concerned about the proposed resolution on anti-Semitism. From what I understand, what was originally a genuine effort to condemn attacks on Jews in the United States by the council has morphed into some kind of litmus test on Israel for our town council. My biggest concern is that the fight against anti-Semitism is not being advanced by this process. If your purpose is to sincerely fight anti-Semitism, I must ask, will this resolution help to clarify the issues and open up the conversation, or will it veer off into a debate over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and further divide our community? The language towards the end of the resolution refers to those who are participants in, or whatever, the global BDS campaigns as acts of anti-Semitism. The facts around BDS and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are in dispute by all sides. They're in dispute even by within each side. And I find it really hard to believe that this council has reached a consensus on these facts. The reality is that BDS is a tactic. Those who participate in it do not all have the same views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You cannot characterize most people who participate in it or the tactic itself as anti-Jewish, because this would not be accurate. There are also people who oppose BDS, and you cannot characterize all of those people as anti-Palestinian. Both of these stances are slanders against people who live in our community. And putting out these resolutions with these kinds of one-sided stances are reckless and hurt the fight against anti-Semitism by confusing people about who promotes and who benefits from attacks on Jews. However, I believe there is a majority in this community, and I don't think the petitions register it. That majority includes those who oppose BDS, those who support BDS, and those who do neither, including many who are Jewish and many who are Muslim and others who are neither, but all of whom believe that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict cannot be helped through this resolution, as is completely self-evident by the results that it has already produced. This should give you pause. This should give all of us pause. Bullying our neighbors into taking political positions has never advanced any fight for social justice, and it won't this time either. Thank you.
Please state your name and address.
My name is James Boyle. I'm a Rutgers University student and a member of the university's chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, and I also serve as the Public Affairs Director for 90.3 The Core, the Livingston campus radio station at the university.
So I need your address.
I am not a resident of Highland Park.
That
but,
doesn't matter. What is your address?
I live at 61 Gilden Street, New Brunswick.
Thank you.
I have covered the borough quite frequently, including the ongoing problems of racial profiling and unjust policing within the community that the community is dealing with. While the resolution that the council will pass tonight is understandably shocking to many, in some ways the systematic racism that still exists within the borough, in my opinion, proves why actions like these are unfortunately business as usual in Highland Park. Although separated by thousands of miles, the struggle for Palestinian liberation and the nonviolent movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions that support this struggle is not very different from the struggles of Black and brown residents for transformative justice. Because the logic that allows the media to show images of Mike Brown stealing cigarillos after he was gunned down by police in Ferguson is the same logic that forces Palestinian mothers and fathers to somehow explain how their dead children, shot by the IDF sniper rifles, were not agents of Hamas, but simply protesting for the freedom and self-determination that every human being is entitled to. The blatant racism of Highland Park police following teenagers into their own home with their guns drawn is no different from the anti-Black, anti-Arab, and Islamophobic racism that allows Israel to maintain its apartheid regime. The racial tensions in Highland Park do not exist in a vacuum. They are the direct result of global systems that have subjugated Black and brown bodies for centuries, and solving racism in the borough will involve looking beyond this community's borders. The fact is, the only people that are being protected by the silencing of the BDS movement is a government that sees an entire internationally recognized people as a, quote, demographic threat. I go to a university where supporters of BDS have been verbally and physically harassed, and the legal suppression of this movement does, at least partially, legitimize that violence. I ask all of you to put yourselves in the shoes of a Palestinian person. If they are shot or maimed for seeking the UN-recognized right of return, if virtually every mechanism of international law has been consistently denied to them, and if nonviolent activism for their own people is deemed anti-Semitic, then what means do they have left to protect themselves from complete and utter elimination? It is why the BDS movement is vital at this moment. I understand that most of this council has made up their mind on this resolution, but I ask you to consider the precedent you are setting. A better and brighter tomorrow is possible for Highland Park as it is for Palestine, but it demands that we get to a place where the achievement of liberation is not dependent on other people's oppression, but rather mutually beneficial and reinforcing.
Good evening.
State your name and address, please.
My name is Itzik Mano. I'm from Highland Park in South 4th Avenue. I apologize for lack of eloquence. I did not plan to speak today. But I saw in the speakers kind of a division between liberals who oppose the resolution and more conservatives or religious people who support it. And I wanted to offer another perspective. I'm an avid liberal. I came from Israel 23 years ago. While in Israel, I was a supporter of Peace Now movement. I participated in demonstrations together with Palestinians. I support the idea of a two-state for two-nation solution. And I support even the right of Palestinians to resist with arms against soldiers in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. However, I definitely oppose the BDS movement because I see it as an anti-Semitic movement. And the reason is that when I came to this country, it was the first time that I confronted anti-Semitism, and it took me some time to realize what it is about. And to me, it seems that it is about a special rage against Jews, that you can have the same thing happen to different people, but there would be a special rage against the same crimes committed by Jews. And this is what I see in the BDS. Yes, there are many problems with the behavior of the Israeli government in the West Bank, but I don't see this same rage directed against other nations where there are similar problems and even greater problems. So I see this, this point, as a special rage, as an anti-Semitic message. And I look at similar cases that have recently occurred in other places. I look at Europe, and I see France, a country with an admirable history of civil rights and liberty. And in France, too, there was a movement of Muslims against Jews that at the beginning, liberals supported the rights of Muslims to express their, the Muslims' view against Israel. Now we are in a situation where Jews cannot live in France. Jews are not secured in France. And when people, when anti-Semites come against you, they do not ask you if you're a liberal or a conservative. They just hate you, and they many times want to kill you. So I think that this goes beyond the division between liberals and conservatives. I think that liberals too, Jews, Jewish, proud Zionist liberals, third generation, third generation non-believers also believe that movements like the BDS are fundamentally anti-Semitic and pose an existential threat for our lives in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Just 1 second before you start speaking. May I have a motion to go beyond 9 p.m.?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
My name's, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
My name's Randy Solomon, 331 Felton Avenue. And I've got 2 points to make. First is, this really needs to be tabled because I don't know the details of this process, but just reading it tonight, it needs editing and vetting. In one sentence, it says BDS campaigns are anti-Semitic. And in the previous sentence, it says some people who support BDS campaigns are not anti-Semitic. So it's just, it doesn't pass muster for a resolution and an act of a governing body. It also says all BDS campaigns are anti-Semitic. So of course we've heard, it does. It says, and I quote, BDS movement and many of the strategies used by BDS campaigns are anti-Semitic.
The founding goals and many of the strategies.
Right, of BDS campaigns. So BDS is a generic term, boycott, divestment. These are common tools. Now, we all know that you're talking about the specific PLO sanction movement, but this is just another example where editing matters. I don't know how many boycotts there are against the state of Israel. We don't know what their founding principles are. We don't know what they're trying to achieve. We don't know what their demands are, so we can't brand them all as being anti-Semitic. So I just think this needs to be tabled, edited, and vetted more. The second point, though, is the intent is pretty clear. It's first defining anti-Semitism as supporting BDS, and then it pledges borough resources to fight for that definition of anti-Semitism. It says that the mayor and council will work through the Human Relations Committee, to provide significant and sustained programming to educate our community about all aspects of anti-Semitism and combat its continued spread. So this definition of anti-Semitism would brand me as an anti-Semite. I lived in Israel for a year. My parents made Aliyah. I've got relatives there. I intend to go back. I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm just in the minority in Israel. So you can't take a position on a political issue, a geopolitical political issue, and then say if you're on one side of that issue, you're anti-Semitic, and then pledge the borough's resources to promote that message.
Hi, Abby Stern Cardinal, Harper Street. I would imagine that you all want something to pass today. You all want this to be over. I would imagine that everyone in this room wants this to be over in the grand scheme of things. One side is asking you to pass a resolution, the other side is asking you to table the resolution. One of those is the easy one because it's over, and one is the hard one because it means we keep talking, we keep debating, and unfortunately we keep calling each other names. Clearly, there have been many, I would imagine at this point over a dozen maybe, versions of this resolution. I agree that you've heard many arguments, and I've heard almost everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people say things in the past, and this has really been belabored. I'd like to offer another option. I've attended many meetings and seen many resolutions passed. You feel that your only two options right now are to pass or to table. I would like to remind you that you have on occasion passed resolutions with revisions and passed a resolution with a condition to make a revision after. I would ask that you remove the paragraph in question. Granted, I haven't had time to read the new version fully and know exactly what was changed. And I would like you to pass something tonight, a resolution against anti-Semitism. I would like this all to be over, and I would like something to be passed, but I'd like you to consider this third option that nobody has discussed and make a revision. Thank you.
Matt Hirsch, 333 Felton Avenue. Sorry, I don't mean to honk the mic. I just want to finish this letter that I am, that I've been.
Thank you for
obligated
being patient,
to
Matt.
read. Oh, well, thank you. The Equity Commission does not have, from a practical standpoint, the resolution potentially stifles public comment. What if a resident with a certain geopolitical stance wants to engage in an intellectual discussion on Middle East peace? Will they have to watch their words for fear of being viewed as hostile by their local government? Does being philosophically complicit in economic warfare have legal ramifications? The Equity Commission does not have a stance on BDS, nor will it render one, because it is so far beyond its charter, and we believe beyond the purview of municipal government. Just like our borough should not take up positions on sanctions toward China, we should not, nor do we need to weigh in on geopolitical concerns of this complexity. And if it's going to be the policy of the Highland Park Borough Council to consider such positions, then it should first embark on a robust education campaign that allows the community to arrive at its own conclusions in a way that prioritizes local interests first. That effort should leverage the borough's vast volunteer network, particularly from boards and commissions such as the Equity Commission, the Human Relations Commission, and the Commission on Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. Highland Park prides itself for its activism and intellectual thought on local and international matters. It's the position of the Highland Park Equity Commission that our local government should not be engaged in legislative retaliation against geopolitical movements and potentially any residents who support them. The resolution confuses an already confusing, complex situation, and it's heartbreaking to see the council consider something that furthers division when we should be educating each other. This issue is pitting residents against each other, and worse, it's creating a rift in our Jewish community. As appointed by this mayor and council, the Equity Commission strongly urges the council to table or vote down this resolution and to start from a better place that truly addresses anti-Semitism in our community. And a personal note, when I moved here, I'm Jewish, not that I need to identify that, but publicly, but I feel that we all have to show that we have some legitimacy in this discussion, which is ridiculous. And I'm not particularly observant, but I very strongly and deeply identify as a Jew. I recognize my family history. I recognize what we have all gone through. When I moved to Highland Park, I didn't know many Orthodox Jews. I have gotten to know this wonderful community that helps me understand the world around me, that helps me understand myself, and that helps me understand what it means to be a better, more complete Jew, because I know the education and I know the stories. The fact that there's so many people in this room that might be thinking negative thoughts about me because of my stance on this one issue or because of what I'm saying breaks my heart. But it's more heartbreaking that my government, my municipal government, is leading the fight in driving this wedge, whether it's intentional or not. I don't think it's intentional, but they have been told many times that this is a divisive subject, and we need to do better. We need to do better, Mayor.
Thank you.
Hava Friedenreich, 62 Grant Avenue. Responding to Daniel's, admonishing us for our behavior on Facebook. I just want to say to everyone, if I typed anything hastily or in anger that offended anyone, I'm sorry. There are a lot of people here who I disagree with, but I also know as individuals, and I respect, and I hope that we can continue being friends beyond this issue. Normally, I'm the one standing here telling my council, don't try and save the world. Let's just focus on stabilizing our taxes and the issues that immediately face Highland Park. It's interesting to listen to people who are the ones advocating for Highland Park saving the world in other ways, saying, well, this one's a geopolitical issue, let's see this aside and stay out of it. For me, as a Jew and an Israeli, this is a local issue. And I think the majority of the Israeli and Jewish community in Highland Park feels the same way, as it fundamentally relates to our feelings of safety. When we can't leave the doors of our places of worship unlocked for fear of terrorism or shootings, when my kids, it's horrible. We have lollipops in our youth groups, so in case there's a shooter, our kids can be kept quiet. That's not why you should have lollipops in synagogue. Leadership means doing the right thing, even when it's unpopular, even when it's divisive. I thank you for your leadership.
I'll be quite short. I'm quite surprised that the Equity Commission, that's what it's called, if I got the name right, and what's been going on here this evening. We're being dragged
Just
into
one
the
thing, you have to state your name.
Oh, it's Mark Colton, Highland Park.
Thank you, John.
41 North 8th Avenue. This is not a debate about good Israelis or bad Israelis, good Israeli government, bad Israeli government. It's not a debate about Palestinians. It's not even a debate about BDS. In fact, the October 3rd version didn't even mention BDS. It's about a definition of what anti-Semitism is. This should have been very, very simple. We're not here to debate. We're not here to second-guess the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. We're not here to second-guess the U.S. Congress. We're not here to second-guess the United Nations. We're not here to second-guess the German government, Austrian government. We're not here to even address the disparate rabbis and what they're thinking. It's a very simple thing. It is a definition. We're being dragged in intentionally into a discussion we shouldn't be in. There's one discussion: what is anti-Semitism? What its manifestations are? Are those manifestations going to impact Jews in Highland Park? As in fact, America. We heard it's all about the Benjamins previously. We've heard other kind of catcalls towards Jews. There's a reference point that's going on, and the implications would be, and the implications are destruction of Israel and destruction of the people in it. And we know what happens to the Kurds. We know what happens to the Yazidis. We know what happens to other minorities. There's only one issue here. What is anti-Semitism? How is it defined? And everything else is distraction and smoke and politics. Thank you.
Hello, Council. My name is Brian Nelson. I'm at 147 North 6th Avenue. I feel compelled to speak tonight solely because I was late to signing the community petition opposing this resolution, and I wanted to make sure you got my signature and my opinion. And I wanted to say that in addition to the things that were spoken to tonight regarding Clause 7, I am profoundly concerned about inaccuracies surrounding the term of self-determination and who that applies to. I don't believe it's been universally applied to the exclusion of the Jewish state. And I also would say that I'm very, very profound concerns over any state, whether a nation, a state government, or municipality, determining what is quote-unquote legitimate criticism. I think that is a very dangerous, slippery slope. And I hope that my third concern is that I'm deeply concerned that having these concerns doesn't label me as anti-Semitic in this community. I have very good relations with my Jewish friends and neighbors in this community, and it breaks my heart to think that that would be damaged by such a divisive and controversial and unnecessary resolution. It is necessary to condemn anti-Semitism, and I stand with anyone who does so, and I stand to defend and protect all of the Jewish residents of Highland Park against anti-Semitic hate speech or violence. This resolution does not achieve that, and I strongly urge you to vote it down or table it for further discussion. Thank you.
Monique Coleman, 407 Lincoln Avenue. I do want to first just echo my sentiments about the procedural nature of what's happening tonight, and I know this has already been said, but I think it needs to be stated again. thank you, council, mayor, for taking real serious steps at being more transparent at what you do, starting with having your 6:30 meetings here in public, recording them. Many of us would not have been able to even know that there was a change to the resolution if we weren't here at that 6:30 meeting. So that is a huge, I think, accomplishment that you've responded to the concerns of the community members around being more open and transparent. So then to make changes, even if it's wording changes to 1 or 2 paragraphs on the night that you're going to vote on the resolution, is wholly unacceptable in terms of procedural responsibility as publicly accountable figures of our government here. We cannot have this process go forward tonight knowing that you literally just provided this resolution for the public to be able to make input on, and for even you yourselves to consider amongst yourselves. So I would please ask that for that reason alone, you table this current version of the resolution, go back to the process. As much as we all want to see anti-Semitism resolution passed in this town, it has to be done right, A. And B, I do want to also emphasize what I've said in the past, that we need a resolution that's going to be bringing this community together and not dividing it. I also want to just ask a clarifying question to you, Josh Fine. You mentioned earlier Lieutenant Governor Oliver's initiative, right? The statement that she made to the school.
She was acting governor at the time.
At the time, yeah. So you stated that she mentioned that schools need to really come down hard on bigotry and bias and hate happening in schools. It's happening all over the country. It's certainly happening here in Highland Park. As a Board of Education member, I know personally what our schools have experienced around bigotry and hate. And of course, I'm speaking here personally, not as a Board of Education member. But I do want you to clarify that the language that Sheila Murphy used did refer generally and inclusively to hate and bias, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so do we as a borough have a resolution currently that completely makes a strong stand against all forms and expressions of hate and bias and bigotry in this town? Do we have that as it stands?
So we have a resolution that was passed that led to the formation of the Immigrant and Refugee Task Force. I'm trying to remember the exact words, but it basically talks about all.
So welcome and inclusive is one thing, but does it make a strong statement about we are against all forms of expressions of hate, bigotry, bias? Do we have that?
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm trying to remember the words. I don't know if there's anyone who remembers the exact phrasing of the.
I don't think so.
The
as much as I
immigrant,
remember,
it was
I don't
all.
think so.
Marginalized. It was about against all marginalized citizens.
Okay, so it sounds to me like we don't have then a resolution that takes a strong stand against all forms and expressions of bigotry, bias, hatred. Would I be correct in assuming that? Because marginalized populations,
Right.
yes, they do experience
Right.
all those, but that's not a strong statement specifically about bigotry and hate and bias.
Right, to your point.
And that's inclusive as well. I know you probably may not.
Right, I would say that the one thing that comes to mind right now is Stephanie, was it in 2018 or was it earlier this year? We did do a specific resolution in regard to the hate that has been experienced by the Sikh community. That was a separate resolution, right?
That was the only one that we did
that I can
along
remember
that
right now.
around the Sikh Awareness Month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was tied
Right,
into.
I mean,
So we need to address it.
So the answer to your question is we do not have, that I'm aware of, which means since 2015, that there, I can't think of one resolution that clearly states what we consider to be hate or bias
Against all
specifically.
peoples that are.
Yeah.
So I guess then my question would be, I know Congress went through this process recently, right, this past spring, and they started out with a very strong effort against anti-Semitism and passing a resolution against it. And they finalized a resolution that was truly inclusive, right, of all forms of hate and bigotry. So I think my question to you all would be to consider looking at a very inclusive resolution that addresses anti-Semitism, all forms of and expressions of bigotry. And I will not list them all because of course, we have a line. But we do really, I just can't emphasize it enough that I am firmly a believer in representing my brothers and sisters who are Jewish here and experience personally anti-Semitism in this town as much as I am also clearly aligned with other community members here that experience different forms of bigotry and hatred and violence. It happens here, right here, and it's across the board. So we're all personally affected by this hatred and violence, and it's certainly impacting our schools. We need to be talking more generally about this, is what
Right.
I'm saying, and being more inclusive.
Right.
So all this time we're spending on one resolution that doesn't even capture all that we need to be capturing needs to be a part of the conversation as
Okay.
well.
Thank you. That's 3 minutes.
Seth Copperdale, my wife Stephanie, and I have been pastors here for 18 years in Highland Park. And I just want to ask the question, who am I in Highland Park if this resolution passes tonight? So just who I am, all right? I'm a pastor of a church where on a weekly or every other week, the Highland Park Minion, a conservative congregation, has its meetings in our church. I also have IL Parrots that meets regularly in our building, and Jewish Voices for Peace. Those all meet in our building. Jewish Voices for Peace, which I heard spoken about negatively. I love Jewish Voices for Peace because I love Naomi Klein, because I love the way she speaks about the environment, and I've only in time learned about other perspectives from her. Those all are in our church building, and I'm not ashamed to say it. A number of years ago, I read Jimmy Carter's book, Peace, Not Apartheid. I listened to folks flip out at someone who I thought of as a great friend of Israel, and I think a lot of people thought of him as a great friend of Israel. Well, he did pretty terrific work during his presidency, but completely different view. We read books like that in our congregation. Who are we in Highland Park? Are we allowed to talk about things that question Israel? In response to the question of why is Israel different, we have a relationship that pumps billions of dollars into certain spots in the world and not to others. It's not just Israel's different, but the places where the American government is pumping billions of dollars in, I feel like we have more of a legitimate time to speak to things. And I want to just say, too, that we're going to continue to stand against anti-Semitism wherever it is. In the bathrooms of our church, I bet I've had more swastikas that I've called the police about in my church building than have the synagogues within the synagogues in this town. And every time it happens, we call the police, and the police know that. Those are documented, and no one ever brings those up in these spaces. Who are we in this community? We brought 10,000 villages to this town. Happened to be that Ahmadinejad was in New York City around the same time, and we watched our windows of our shop get cracked open, and I get pointed at as anti-Semitic because of the fact that 10,000 Villages is a fair trade store that's connected with the Mennonites who are standing up for a two-state solution at that time. These are the kinds of things that I really wonder about. If you go down the road of starting to say anybody who stands for BDS is anti-Semitic, you're going to start really bringing up some hard questions. I'm not a member of BDS. I've never actually gone on the BDS website until about 2 weeks ago. But the amount of people who call me and accuse me of somehow being deeply involved in BDS, it's the kind of witch hunt craziness that goes on when we get out of line about things. We just need to stop having councils make decisions about this kind of stuff and stand up against the local problems with anti-Semitism and continue to do battle about things. I'm a two-state solution guy myself. But at this point, when you go decade upon decade, with things like the annexation of the West Bank as a major piece of this election just in the last month, conversations about that, backed by Donald Trump and Netanyahu saying that he's talking with Trump about such things, that's when we have to continue to be pushing back.
Pastor Seth, it's 3. Thank you. You can make that taller if you like.
Pardon?
You can raise the microphone if you like.
This is okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Alan Kaufman. I live at 311 Valentine Street. I'm 79. I'm Jewish. I was bar mitzvahed, confirmed. I'm not a self-hating Jew. I'm very proud of being Jewish. I learned from being Jewish about discrimination, and that has informed my whole life in terms of trying to fight against any forms of discrimination. I spent 23 days in the Mississippi State Penitentiary as a freedom rider. So I've been involved and active, and I want to ask you, why you think there's such division in this room, because I'm asking you to table this because it's a deeply divisive resolution. And why is it so deeply divisive? Because I think if you're really honest about this, somebody wanted an anti-BDS resolution. I'm not somebody that's for BDS or against BDS. I really haven't paid that much attention to BDS. But I've certainly paid attention to Israel and the Palestinians for a long, long time. I was born in 1940. I put in money to buy the trees in Israel. So I'm very aware of all that. But I'm also very well aware of the plight of the Palestinians. And as a Jewish person growing up, fighting discrimination and being told every day when I was at Temple, you were slaves in the land of Egypt, I came to hate every form of oppression, including that of the Palestinians. And the problem here is that I think one of the women up here was talking about the line between Zionism and Judaism, and it gets played both ways, so that it gets played both ways. So what happened here is that you start off with a bunch of whereases about anti-Semitic acts. What happened in the temple? What happened with the swastikas? I don't think that has anything to do with BDS. It has nothing to do with BDS. But then it got down to BDS, because that was the real intent of this whole thing, was BDS. That's what I think. And BDS is very divisive, because it's when you say that BDS movement is for the destruction of Israel, it's not for the destruction of it for Israel. Why are we having that conversation? BDS is talking, the BDS movement came about, and all movements that have come about try to do something about the Palestinian issue is about the Palestinian issue and the fact that the Palestinians are without a homeland, and that's incontrovertible. So that is what the issue is. We should not be involved in that issue. You want to deal with anti-Semitism? That's not anti-Semitism, that's anti-Zionism. So people in this room, when they say they're Jews or they're Zionists, they're really Zionists, because they're talking about Israel, not about the Jewish religion, okay? So I think you should table this motion, and get back to the other things that people have talked about, because otherwise the town is going to be completely divided on this issue.
Thank you.
Henry Shands, 29 Brookfield Road, Edison, New Jersey. I had not intended to speak, so I may be somewhat incoherent at points. But the one point I would like to begin with is by stating I survived the Second World War because there were some wonderful Christian ladies who were willing to hide me from the Nazis and who were willing to take their lives in their own hands so that I could survive. And at that point, and somebody mentioned what's happening in France with this great tradition, there were millions of Frenchmen who probably were not pro-Nazis, but who, by their being quiet and not doing anything when it called for some brave people to do something, did not act. And as a result of their silence, they allowed the most horrible thing in centuries to occur. To paraphrase now, let me go and express my support why the Council is correct in including a reference and opposition to BDS in its resolution. BDS embodies the plot to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel and Israel alone. BDS does not go against the Turks for what they've done, the Syrians for what they've done, the Saudis for what they've done, but Israel alone. BDS was birthed as an anti-Semitic hate fast in South Africa in 1991. Its grandparents, as somebody mentioned earlier, on one side were the Nazis who organized the boycott of Jewish business, academics, and artists in the 1930s. Its grandparents on the other side were the Muslim leaders who organized the Arab boycott of all Israeli and Jewish commerce in the years following the establishment of Israel in 1948. Its parents are the contemporary bigots who single out only Israel for boycott and seek to use this tactic to end the existence of the world's only nation state for the Jewish people, and for us all to note the only democracy in the Middle East. The illegitimate birth of this tactic reflects the anti-Semitic goal of its founders and leaders, and that is to isolate, delegitimize, and ultimately destroy the nation state of the Jewish people.
Mr. Shanter, we're at 3 minutes.
Anyone who supports this bigoted effort, I'm sorry.
We're at 3 minutes. Each person's allowed 3 minutes.
Last sentence. Anyone who supports this bigoted effort in the belief that it is solely a protest against Israel policies is being misled. The true goal of BDS is revealed in that it started at the point where Israel was willing to forego and partition and give over to a large chunk of its land and the Gaza Strip.
Thank you. Because I can't see beyond the door, is there anyone who has not yet spoken online? Because I'd like to give them a chance to speak. So please, whoever has not yet spoken, please step up. And we have, again, we're at 3 minutes a person.
Okay. Hi, Michelle May. I'm completely changing the subject here. I want to thank Highland Park PD and everyone who put on the trunk or treat. It was great for the kids, and it was really good to see a lot of people out there. Sorry, I'm at South Adelaide. Also, I want to thank Highland Park PD for a certain situation that came to my attention where a child reported that their friend was attempting to commit suicide or had a plan to commit suicide. And HPPD was quite professional and quite caring in that situation, and I thank you for that. You saved a child. Thank you. You may have saved 2 children in that process, and I just want to say I really appreciate it. It comes from my heart. Also, I have a concern about some of the handicap parking spaces in my complex that are not painted, and I would like to know who's responsible for making those visibly handicapped spaces in a private, I guess it's a private lot.
So Michelle, this is the section where we're specifically talking only about the resolution, but to answer your question, I'm going to ask the borough administrator to give you a quick response, and then we'll have to move on back to the resolution.
Okay.
I need to know what development you're talking
Just
about.
come over here.
Sure.
You can come over here and let somebody,
Yeah.
let somebody else talk.
Hi, Lisa Ben Chaim, 436 South Fifth Avenue. I want to address something that keeps coming up about tabling it and why we got to this point. I don't know where many of you have been, but this has been going on 7 months? About 7 months, correct, where you started. I'm not one to get too involved initially before this in ordinances. I listen, I hear, but I haven't stepped up. But when this came out, I said, you know what? I'm interested. I want to hear what's being said. So someone who doesn't normally heard about this, I've known this has been going on at least since the summer. and I've heard the many different wordings that have been going on. Why now, all of a sudden, you come out? Where were you? If you had something to say earlier in the process, you could have done what many have done, probably on both sides, to send your views and your ideas to the council, to stand up here and talk at a council meeting, which I've done before, and others who have done before on both sides. But now, all of a sudden, when we get to the deadline that they have imposed, and they have worked hard. I was here at the last meeting where the working session worked very hard, and I was impressed by quite a few statements that were made and the discussions that went on that were civil and productive. And I want to say to Elsie, you talked about education, and you know I mentioned to you that that is like such an important part of this, that this resolution, don't start education now. That's what this proposal, this resolution is about. Part of it is about the education part. We need, now is the time to make a stand, to say, let's move forward. Let's have these discussions. I was at the reading, and there were at least 3 different small groups of civil conversation going on at the library. Civil conversations between people who don't agree, but they were civil. And that's what this needs to happen. And this resolution will allow at least many people to feel that we are being heard, that you have an interest in the community and the individuals in the community. And by the way, it does say in the resolution that not all BDS supporters are anti-Semitic. So it's there. What more are you asking for? Just to take out the BDS because you don't you agree with BDS? You support it? No, it states it. I believe it's fair, and I feel, and I hope you pass it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
My name is Bob Miller, South First Avenue. Against all of my expectations, I found this discussion interesting and informative, and I think it should continue. If you think that a resolution is going to stop or decrease anti-Semitism, you're mistaken. However, educational work is extremely important toward that goal, and I think this discussion has been a step forward. People on both sides have said things that I found true and interesting, while I've disagreed with people from both sides as well. I think it's true, the first sentence, that today anti-Semitism is promoted by individuals and groups at both ends of the political spectrum. That does not make the challenge before us easier. It's more complex, more complicated to unwind different ways in which actions and statements are anti-Semitic. It takes work to develop that. And that's what this resolution does not do. It does not explain what is anti-Semitic and why. And we need more discussions along those lines. I thought the speaker who showed the photographs accurately depicted examples of anti-Semitism on the left. I thought it's an important aspect of the reality that we confront today. But to say something like, many of the strategies used by the BDS campaign are anti-Semitic. And not to say which are those strategies and why are they anti-Semitic. Or what are the other strategies that you don't consider anti-Semitic and why. I think there's a lot of variation in that, and I am encouraged to continue the educational discussion. I think that's the most important thing that we can do.
Okay. Now, I know, is there anybody who has not spoken?
Good evening. My name is Debbie Atlas, 310 Lincoln Avenue, Highland Park. I just wanted to say something from the heart. I've lived in Highland Park for 26 years. I raised 4 children here, 4 professional children, a doctor, 2 dentists, a speech therapist. My kids always used the Highland Park Library. I was accused, not me personally, but at one of the Board of Trustees meetings, it was said that the Orthodox are, it was implied, maybe not said, the Orthodox are uneducated and are not library users. Well, I can tell you that my kids and I have been Highland Park Library users for years. I am horrified by what has gone on in this community. I'm a member of the CJJ PAC committee. I cannot tell you how disappointed I am in this town and what has been going on here. My parents are Holocaust survivors. I have a daughter who moved to Israel last summer with 3 grandsons who were going to fight in the Israeli army. I challenge anybody who has spoken against this resolution to say that they have parents who are Holocaust survivors and have a child who moved to Israel who has children that will fight in the army. Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart said about pornography, I may not be able to define it, but I know it when I see it. I know that this is anti-Semitism, and I am so disappointed in this town. I cannot begin to tell you. Thank you for listening.
So again, let me ask, is there anyone there who has not yet spoken? All right, so it's...
Many who have.
I'm sorry?
There's only about 4 or 5 or 6 of us who have.
Okay, so it is, you know, technically we're supposed to be finished with all of the work by 10 o'clock. I know each of you have spoken before. If you have something new to add, please, you know, limit it to 3 minutes. But if it is the same thing over again, please let us get to work on this and all the other things as well. I'm not trying to diminish anyone's opinion. I know there's a lot to be said, but I also know there's a lot of work ahead of us.
Thank you. My opinion on Israel was fundamentally changed by the son of a Holocaust survivor who pointed out to me at the time of the 1967 war some of the real parallels between what Israel was doing and classic European racism. So he certainly never sent his kids to fight in Israel, but he wouldn't. They might have done it on their own if they chose, but they didn't. I want to humanize people. I want to humanize people who support BDS. I'm a person who supports BDS. Why do I support BDS? At the beginning of Israel, 700,000 Palestinians were driven by terror out of that country.
Quiet, please.
And if we're talking about education on this issue, you should include some of the scholars who have documented that fact and some of the people whose families, and even they, if they're still alive, live through that fact. I am appalled that, as far as I've heard, not one member of the council has spoken with any of the serious representatives of the Palestinian people and movement who live in this area. This is not serious work on a resolution. You've talked essentially to one side, and you're condemning what is in effect a self-defense, nonviolent tactic of another. Now, I said I was going to say why people support BDS. There are, for example, 2 million Gazans being subjected by force of arms by Israel and Egypt to living conditions that are absolutely shameful. The real threat of a Holocaust there, if things should get really even more violent, and the real threat of an infectious disease outbreak. And I say that as a representative of an expert in infectious disease. I want to add to that I have helped to take down Jim Crow, like Mr. Kaufman. I have boycotted, divested, and sanctioned South Africa. I've opposed racism in this town and others when it's occurred. I've helped stop the HIV epidemic. And I hate anti-Semites. And one last point, totally new.
He's wrapping.
The action plan here in terms of education talks about the Anti-Defamation League.
Okay.
And we should be aware that ADL has been accused of racism by many groups.
Thank you. Oh, there's someone who hasn't spoken yet.
John Kovacs.
No, John.
Oh.
Please state your name and address.
My name is Michael Ben-Chaim. I'm a resident of Highland Park.
Can you raise the microphone a bit so we can
I'm a
hear?
resident of Highland Park for 18 years. I'm part of this membership. Some people know me. A lot of people know me over here. Some people don't. I just want to mention a few words that it's really bothered me because I'm born in Israel. I'm the only part of my family born in Israel. My parents came from Morocco. We lived good with the Arabs. I lived in Israel around maybe 6 villages, Basmat, Tivon, a few Shparam, all neighborly. The buses used to go through my village. We all live good. This resolution that you guys are going to do, it's really good. The reason to it, because people don't understand. That BDS, you heard, not just the Israeli, the Arabs. The Arabs have factories, they have villages producing food. They live exactly like normal Israelis. They hurt more the Arabs than the Israelis. And those people, they think they're going to hurt the Israelis. They shame on themselves because they hurt the Arabs more. So shame on yourself, and don't tell me that you don't know about peace. We don't talk about peace. We're talking who you're going to hurt. You hurt the people that you try to protect. And I'm going to tell you something. I lived all around Israel, and I came over here very young after the army. And every day I live it. My son, he lives over there, and I fought in 2 wars in Israel. And I was in Lebanon. And the only people that saved the Lebanese, the Christians, were the Jews. I was there, and I saw the bad things that happen to those. And if you don't understand it, it's very hard to understand. Only people in being in Vietnam will understand it. So let me tell you something. Please forget about it. We have to live in peace. You guys don't know what to live in war. You don't want to live in this area. You should have a peace. Distinguished rabbis, I'm sorry to tell you that, but thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody being here. And you have to support the truth, and the truth it is that we help the Arab more than anybody outside in the world did help Arabs. I was there, I saw there, and thank you for your time.
I'm Ruth Colton. I live at 41 North 8th Avenue. I generally don't like public speaking, and actually this forum has saddened me. I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor who survived 3 years during the Holocaust in 5 different camps. I am also the daughter of a Jewish Palestinian who lived in Israel in 1932 and during the war was a soldier in the Royal Air Force and was in the Jewish Brigade and fought during World War II in the Sudan for freedom for the world. I stand here today very saddened that after 75 years after the war, and also 70 years after the creation of the State of Israel, that we need to be debating this. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. The BDS goal is to dismantle it. Anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head. We have it here. I commend Josh Fine and Matt Hale for your diligence, your work, your effort in being respectful to the community of Highland Park. You have done it listening to everybody's input. I commend you, and I encourage the passage of the resolution.
Melanie McDermott, I'll be brief because I've spoken before, and I hope I have what is a constructive suggestion. Nobody's heritage or their family experience or their identity should give them more or less voice to have a say in this discussion, and it should not be about numbers, because that is why we have a representative democracy with rights of free speech. If 82% of the community or 95% of the community feels that one political stance is the appropriate one for a borough, that does not make it okay. So here's what I hope is a construction suggestion. We cannot and should not legislate here in this borough anything about ideology, anything about political alliances. No matter how strongly we feel, that is not democratic, that is not American. But what we can do, and here is the challenge before us, is we can legislate against certain forms of behavior. So we need to define a form of anti-Semitism that makes it unacceptable to make threats of violence. It makes it unacceptable to use hate speech, because hate speech is something that is defined. And we have to keep the conversation going. I have also learned a lot tonight. And I tell you, if we pass a resolution that names BDS and then says that the borough is going to be doing programming to instruct me and my children and everybody else here about what they should or shouldn't believe about our politics, that is wrong, and it will only bring more trouble upon our heads. However, if we continue to have fora, if we continue to take the time to listen to each other, then we have the opportunity to learn from each other. We have the opportunity, if there are threats, to know, because I didn't even know this stuff, and strategize about how to solve them. Please do not try to instantiate in a borough resolution what our political viewpoints should be. Please continue to bring us together. Please pass a clean resolution against anti-Semitism and all forms of bias and hate speech. Thank you very much.
And I'm going to, John, you will be the last speaker, and we'll get back to
Mayor, is someone outside that haven't spoke?
John Kovac.
Who, oh,
I think he has the cat. Oh,
No, that's
he's not
Mr.
speaking.
No.
John Kovac, 3rd Avenue.
okay.
I've spoken in anger here a bunch of times because I'm kind of angry about this, but I'm not speaking in anger now. I'm speaking with a degree of sincerity and really sadness. We need more leadership in this town, and it may be that you oppose the way Israel treats the West Bank Palestinians and what's happening in Gaza, and an argument can be made on the other side that peace was offered to them and they rejected it, and all they're willing to do is to eliminate Israel, and that's why they're in the quagmire they're in. That be it, what it may be. The answer to that, if you're an American concerned about that, is to lobby government to advocate for a change in policy. Nothing wrong with that. It may be that you think that too much money is being given to Israel, billions of dollars, as was noted before. And then the answer to that, well, of course, the people are also concerned, I'm concerned, about the billions of dollars that Qatar and Saudi Arabia is giving to Georgetown University and Texas A&M and Columbia University, and perhaps even Rutgers, to propagandize the students with hate. what I mean by moral leadership is it's okay to advocate for these policies, but don't give comfort, don't give a place to a group that is going to single out Jewish students on our college campuses and in our town and apply a system of apartheid to them, to discriminate against them. That is what I mean by moral leadership. Step up and say, no, that's wrong. You can oppose Israel, but do not do it in a way that's going to, I don't advocate for going to Saudi students on campus and going up to them and tarring them for everything that Saudi Arabia does. That's what's happening here. That's wrong. And if we have leadership in this town that steps up and stops that, then we will progress and we will be a better place.
Okay. Rabbi Baisley will be the last speaker on this subject before we go on.
Thank you. Rabbi Philip Baisley, Lincoln Avenue. People were referring to, and I know many of you are sighing because the clergy person is coming up to the microphone at the end. But I was referred to as being the liberal or the Reform Jew here or the Reform rabbi here who stands in support with his colleagues, and I do stand in support with my colleagues. But what I wanted to say might be slightly different than what some others have said, which is I want to take a moment and thank all of you, because I know you're coming to this with great care and concern for our town, and you want to make sure that everybody's safe, and you're wrestling and grappling with some tremendous things, and you know that no matter how tonight ends, it's going to be difficult for a lot of us. What I'm hoping, regardless of how you vote tonight, that we consider how to bring the town together and how we build bridges towards one another so that we can have peaceful conversations. You know, I look at Pastor Capperdale, and he and I stand together on so many issues. And this Sunday we're going to stand together again, and I know we're going to stand together in the future. He and I might not agree on this issue. We don't agree on this issue. But we can have that conversation with one another with love for each other at the same time. And when I think about Highland Park, that ability to have that communion together is what's really important. And I hope after this vote is over and this is done, that we can return to that lifestyle here in Highland Park, because I think that's what's really necessary. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi. Okay, we're going to move on now. Yes, Borough Attorney.
Madam Mayor, the next step, there is a motion on the table. It's been seconded, and it's time to vote.
And the motion, could you refresh our memory?
The motion is to adopt the resolution that was read into the record by Councilman Fine this evening.
Okay. So there's been a motion, there's been a second, and now I'm asking for a roll call vote. Well, that's what I've,
That's where we've been for 2 hours.
yeah.
They've been discussing it for 2 hours.
Oh, I'm sorry, they did it by email, yeah. Okay, well, you're interrupting, let them go ahead.
Okay.
You should call the roll, Jen.
And as each person votes, they're able to speak as well.
Councilman Fine?
So, again, I just want to, before voting, say as follows. I would agree with probably everybody in this room that this is an imperfect resolution. There's no question about that. Oh, sorry. That this is an imperfect resolution. I don't doubt that. But we've been working for many, many months on this. And in regard to transparency, I don't disagree. I think there's always room for more meetings and more discussion. I would tell you that I'll speak for myself, but I pretty much think I can assure you that the other council members as well, that at least that I've spoken with, and the mayor have read hundreds of emails over the past couple of months on the different sides. We've also looked at many different versions of the resolution. We've seen the petitions. So we've taken all that into account. And if the question is why all of a sudden are we coming up with some sort of, or some different language today, that's after having taken into account all of the responses. I can point, there are clauses that were added here that were requested by people on different sides of the issue. So with that said, and with knowing it's an imperfect resolution, but that we've worked to come to this point in time, I vote yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin.
Wow, I've heard a lot in 6 months, but for the past 2 weeks, it has been truly a town divided. There's division every which way in the Jewish community. I've sat here where people say, oh, we tolerate the minorities. Right at that dais they said it. And then how are we supposed to feel? Because we're being tolerated. I've gotten emails that have been so blatantly biased and bigoted and racist that was sent to me, addressed to me. And here we are, and we are being tasked. Well, let me say, I am being tasked to vote on something first that I didn't even understand, wasn't even made aware of. It's another country's policy. I'm an immigrant in this country, and you can't ask you to vote on something in the country of my birth. That would be impossible. But here it is that there was this book reading that brought all of you out tonight. I learned a lot about the dome over Israel. Didn't even know that existed. I learned a lot about the funds, the religious funds. I've learned about Intifada. Didn't know what that means. And I've seen the hatred that amongst this section of Jewish people and that section of Jewish people that spewed out for the past month or so. I've received personally over 500 emails, and I took time and I read, I would say 95% of them. I have met with members from the houses of worship, all houses of worship, and everyone has given me why I should vote for this or why I should not vote for this. And I think the task is way too great to ask me to vote on something that not even yourself can agree with, that you rip each other apart. And our town is literally divided. If it's not the black and brown community coming up to me and saying, what do they mean we tolerate the minorities? That's another if. That should never have happened. I love Highland Park. I didn't just happen to move here. I moved here by choice. I love serving on the town council. I love seeing my neighbors. I love getting along. I love the service that I do. But at this point, I have a sign that says, and I believe in all my heart, that hate has no home here. And I was proud to purchase the sign and put it on my property. And when the winds came and the snow came and the stake in the ground blew off, I put it on the side of my property. It's permanently affixed because that's what I believe. But coming here tonight for the venom that's either spewed to me by email, the venom that you spew at each other, and then you want me to decide about which way or that way, I think we should deal with the anti-Semitism, the anti-hate that's in this room, that we're all throwing around at each other. I sat here and I said to myself, I can't do this. Look at these people. They're tearing each other apart. They're supposed to be on the same side. I didn't know that there was a thing as a Zionist and a non-Zionist. It has been an education. When I was here on the 3rd, I did ask, I said, okay, what we have looks pretty good, but education must be included. Because somebody who's not from the Jewish faith and don't understand anything about what happens in Israel or are the words that are thrown around that you guys are familiar with, I'm not. I don't know what they are, don't know what they meant. Tiny bit of window into the educational world of you know, the BDS or the non-BDS, the Zionists or the non-Zionists, and then to see each of you tear each other apart, and then in turn, throw it at me. You know, because some people will say directly Elsie. And I'm like, when did I get caught up in all of this? I don't know. We come from this United States, we have freedom of speech. My son lives in a country where a teddy bear is totally banned. My son lives in that country now that a teddy bear cannot be shown or cannot be bought into that country. We have where we have freedom of speech. And I'm not in any capacity can take away someone's right to say do or don't, or take away their freedom of speech. The town is divided, and it breaks my heart. It truly breaks my heart to see this. We got to do better. You know, education is the key, and having better conversations amongst ourselves, civil conversations. I haven't seen that. And it just makes me sad to live in Highland Park now, because the town that I love and that I was always proud to say, you know, we get along, we have our differences. It seems like we want to shoot each other, want to kill each other, because people are, you know, the body language is like, whoa. I can't vote yes or no for this. I'm not comfortable in doing so. I can't. We have 2 commissions, actually 3, that is tasked with taking a look and giving us advice. And those people worked hard and tireless. And tonight, I would vote that we table this, get it back to them, have more discussions, and then bring it to us. That's my point, Mayor.
Councilman George?
Table.
No.
No, actually.
Further
made a
So
discussion.
she's,
No, her
Further
vote is to
discussion.
table.
Okay.
yeah.
I hate to do this, but there's another procedural motion. I move to extend the meeting beyond 10, which is
Oh, thank you.
our bylaw quitting time.
Thank you for that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I think that this problem took place because Highland Park was originally deliberately targeted. And I believe that it was deliberately targeted by at least one organization or shadow organization that in part or in whole uses the BDS motion. But when the issue came up, I advised several council people and the mayor as well that I was not sufficiently familiar with this and that I wanted to do some research, and I did. And I set out to look up what I thought were reasonably unobjective sources, because there weren't very many objective sources. So I read what I could on one side and said how horrible Israel was. And I'm pretty well familiar, having lived through all those, not only the war that we protested and I got beaten for, which was Vietnam, but we went through the 67 war, the 72 war, and so on, and we at least lived in those times. And then I read the ones that supported it on the other side and likened it to South Africa, which I was involved in as well back in the apartheid moment because of my relationships, to be quite frankly, about it. So after we're targeted, it doesn't go away. We are still stuck with the problem, and the people who targeted us are laughing their asses off at us because we're fighting it, we're battling it, we're arguing about it, we're either learning or we're not learning about what it is. We're either victims of anti-Semitism or not. And yet we're still engaged in this battle. It's one of the biggest crowds we've had. We did have a bigger crowd when we dealt with some geopolitics with regard to the immigration issue. And if you go back and you look at your notes of that time, like I did, I pulled my notes out in the discussions, that wasn't so much addressed to the issue of immigrants, which we all agreed we should support and protect. That was against a new president who, I can't use most of the words that I would use in private conversation, who has bastardized the Constitution, who has overplayed his executive power, and who has fomented the rising trend of hate, of partisanship, of politics over truth, and that's enough. But if you remember those days, that was more driven by Trump than it was by the immigrants and protecting them, because it was his policy. And at that time, we engaged in geopolitics and national politics. So where does it leave us now? It leaves us now with this same dissension, and a number of people have pointed out, and as Councilwoman Foster Dublin has pointed out, it leaves us worse than we were before. So the people who started this off are still laughing their asses off at us because we've gotten worse. And the commentaries have gotten worse. The emails have gotten worse. I demand you do this. No, wait a minute. I demand you do this. No, wait a minute. I demand you do this. So everybody's demanding what their point of view is. It's not, the tenor of the emails is not anymore, I really want you to support this. I really want you to support that. Is, I demand that you do this. And a lot of the comments tonight have been, I demand that you do that. Before I discuss what I feel at this point in time, there was another resolution in 1776. And at the time of that resolution, one representative said, I was elected and sent here to represent the people of my state, but I was also elected to exercise my judgment regardless of theirs. So, here we are at the present situation, and we have positions on both sides which are very extreme. So the next test I did after looking up that is saying, you know, I have friends who are Jewish. I have people that I respect more than you could believe, my fellow council members who are Jewish, that we spend a lot of time talking, and not just on this. We talk about what our neighborhoods are like, and I constantly preach to them of our community, of our communities, is what Highland Park is about. And they sometimes go in different directions, and they sometimes don't agree, but we are all communities within Highland Park that make up the community, and it is that community which I represent. It is that community I've served in many capacities for 20 years. And it is in that community, that capacity, that I initially sought position on council and have stayed on council, is to represent the community. So I then made the effort to say, I can understand intellectually, although I'm not Jewish, how people would feel. But then I said, that's not enough. Why are people so passionate about this? So I equated it and putting your hands around it, and in what I do for a living to understand more is there's a lot of that intellectualese. There's a lot of languaging. There's a lot of semantics. I like to put my hands on it and actually be quiet for a minute and see what it really feels like. So I talked to myself about the swastikas in the snow compared to another symbol, the Confederate flag, which directly has impacted my family time and time again. Yeah, there are places that we don't go. In the 50s, we have the photographs and actually some souvenirs of Negroes only. But in recent trips down south, it's the Confederate flag symbol, which is now used in the same way and many times. Hate in Highland Park. I've told you before that I didn't experience. I'm an older, white, middle-class lawyer. And by and large, I'm the kind that just moves invisibly because that's just the way things are, just the way things have been. But to have a woman, a black woman, engaged in this very political process, spit on several times, kind of brings it home. So I have to equate that, and you may not think it's equal, but to sit in the quiet and to feel it and not intellectualize it is the best equivalent that I have. So then I look at it and we come to today. Now, I voted to reject the prior one, and that had been agreed to and consensus by council, and if the council will tell you that I called it a challenge, and I said, we need to make a decision one way or another, up or down, but we need to make a decision. So I would like you all to come to the meeting of October 3 with your thoughts and stay till 4 a.m. if that's what it takes to make a decision on what we could possibly agree to. Because at that point in time, there were 8, 9, 10 different versions. There were 5-page versions. There were half-page versions. And we did it. And I admire you all for that. We sat down and we reached a compromise. I'm sorry that unfortunately that was one piece that wasn't filled because people would have seen that we really did. We are at the point where council needs to decide. We know that you all have your opinions. We know that you say there should be no opinion, or that we should support BDS, or that we should be only talking about anti-Semitism. And frankly, I can say I could disagree with all of that, or I can agree with all of that at this point in time. And we probably could all say that to some extent. It's been a very difficult process, and we know that everyone has a difficult decision. The bottom line is, I can't make you all happy, and council can't make you all happy. We have to make a decision, and I think that decision has to be tonight. And that decision could be to accept this change, reject this change, or table this change and talk about it some more. But the one thing that I can guarantee is the talk won't change. The opinions will remain the same, because number one, they're your opinions. Number two, as was put into this amended resolution, it's your constitutional right to feel that way, to speak that way. So that if I can't make you happy, I submit to you that council can't make you happy. But it is our obligation to make a decision. My decision is based upon one more factor and one more consideration. At this point in time, the resolution that we agreed to, and remember, just because we agreed to the form didn't mean that we had to support it. We could have voted that up or down. But this resolution coming about today, a number of people have talked about the transparency. And my obligation to govern, and this point of time, it's our role, all 6 of us, to govern. I'm concerned that the transparency that we have tried to put in this process, excessively, I heard a comment over here saying we had already decided by email, and I can tell you that I shared almost nothing by email except to read all your comments, and a number of comments that I didn't get specifically, other council would send to me and say, please read this comment. Nothing was decided by email, I can tell you that, because I may not have even decided yet. I'm concerned about the transparency, and a number of people said, you know, we've just seen it. When we read it, the first paragraphs are the same. We talked about the educational piece being added in. We talked about the paragraph that's really got everyone incensed and continues to have everyone incensed, which is the paragraph regarding the BDS. We have the constitutional privilege. My concern is this. In looking at this matter for transparency, I'm not really sure that sending it back to committees who have already weighed in on the same thing is going to get us anywhere. It's not going to make all of you agree, and I don't believe that one side or the other is going to take this argument away and dislike each other. You may not have liked what you heard from some people, and you may have a second thought and say, well, I never thought he thought that way. But I'm not sure that any further discussion or review by our Human Rights Commission, by our Equity Commission, is going to change, because I don't believe that the opinions that you have are going to change. And as I said before a number of times, those volunteers to me are the litmus paper that I use of what you all feel. And I don't believe that any further debate on this topic is going to change it. I vote no.
Councilman Hale?
So we've gone back and forth, and we have had every single issue that could be raised about this raised over the last many, many months. And it's gotten complicated, it's gotten complex. We've heard people talking about things many folks don't understand. But at the end of the day, to me, there are a huge number of people in Highland Park who are terrified and scared by anti-Semitism. And it's not the anti-Semitism we all know. It's not the khaki pants and the white shirts. We know where those folks are, we know how horrible they are, and we know where they're going to be. Anti-Semitism is growing not just on the right, it's growing on the left. And that hurts. I consider myself a progressive. I consider myself on so many issues on the political left. And I don't know where to go when that happens. I don't know where to go when anti-Semitism creeps not just from the right, not just from even the center, but when I see it coming all over the place, and when I feel it coming all over the place, that's a time to act. And it's not a time to say, we're not going to talk about anti-Semitism that comes from people that are just like us. We're only going to talk about anti-Semitism that comes from the other. We have to talk about anti-Semitism wherever it comes, wherever it shows its face. And we have to raise those concerns again and again and again. Because if we don't, it will creep in. It will become acceptable. It'll be okay. Oh, we're not really anti-Semitic, we're just anti-Israel. We're not really against you because you're a Jew, we're just against the country that will save you someday. The one place where you might be safe in this world. We're against that. We're really not against you. I wasn't born Jewish. I converted to Judaism. I converted in a conservative conversion, and I converted in an Orthodox conversion. There has been my entire life wondering, I didn't get anti-Semitism the way that people who are born Jewish do. I never felt it the way that I feel it right now. I never felt it the way that it's expressing itself in every facet that I see in our political landscape. It would be very, very easy right now to pass a resolution that doesn't talk about the tough parts of anti-Semitism, the BDS parts of anti-Semitism. But that would be a dishonest part. And that's not something I'm prepared to do. This is a difficult issue. This is something that hurts. It hurts me that I feel anti-Semitic across the board. It hurts me that I have to say that unless we stand up now, we're not going to be able to stand up. When this process started, I did not expect that this is where it was going to go. I thought this was going to be an easy one. But it's not, because we are not looking and not willing to admit that anti-Semitism is not just the product of people we don't like. It is not just the product of those who are different than us. It's not just the product of Donald Trump. Those are all important places that exist, but it exists in a much broader place, and we have to give name to that. And that's why I support this resolution. That's why I think this is an important resolution for us to take a stand on and say that anti-Semitism is something that we will fight no matter where it exists. There is a component in this resolution that has been there from day one, and that is an education process. And that is a process that we have committed to. And it's not as has been hinted at, an indoctrination process. It is a process of trying to understand anti-Semitism across the board. Where it exists, how to confront it, how it exists. And that's something that this resolution does very, very clearly. It very clearly points to that we need to educate broadly in all aspects of anti-Semitism. So at the end of the day, we talk about complex issues, we talk about nuances, but at the end of the day, anti-Semitism is growing in this community, and it hurts, and we need to stand up for it, and that's why I am in favor of this resolution.
Councilwoman Kim Cho-Han.
I would first like to say, as the daughter of a Korean immigrant, I think I have you all beat on foreign policy when we talk about the differences, when we talk about South Korea and North Korea. But I do have my prepared remarks on this issue, and then I have some comments to some of the public comment that I heard tonight. As a non-Jewish member of the governing body, I would like to thank the countless residents for your top layer educating me on this issue from both ends of the spectrum. Every resident that took time out to email me, call me, meet with me, and even took me for a nice culture lunch. But somewhere we lost sight of the goal and roots of this resolution. I remember viewing the first draft. At that time, the resolution had a laundry list of incidents that happened in town involving our Jewish residents. Then I heard members of our community may be starting to carry weapons to synagogue. I was shocked. With that being said, to the many rabbis that have emailed me, I have not seen one question around the safety of your members. How can you help bring awareness to these issues? And even how are we, as your local governing body, addressing in-town Semitism? Needless to say, I was 1,000% behind my council colleagues with putting together an anti-Semitism resolution. But I did not understand the subsidy behind certain language such as 3 Ds of anti-Semitism, which meant I needed to educate myself. And I know when I say that, I am not the only one on this dais that feels that way. We have to fix what is happening at home here in Highland Park. And please, if any rabbis here would like to speak to me, I would love to speak to you. Invite me to your synagogue as well, too. I also want to comment on, and we're talking about putting education part in the resolution. How can I put education in a resolution when I'm not educated myself? I also want to talk about 7 to 8 months, unless maybe I was away, but I don't, when I look back at maybe I wasn't involved in those conversations, but when I look back at the agenda, I don't see that. I don't remember those conversations. I don't remember it being with Human Relations. I don't remember that in February and January you're going to tell me we sat here and talked about this resolution. Maybe I wasn't here. And then in the summer we only meet once a month. So how was this really out there for both sides to weigh in on? Also, today, the limited time that people even had to speak on the resolution, or I don't even know what resolution they're commenting on. Are they commenting on the resolution that was posted Friday, the resolution that was placed in the I'm from Highland Park group, the resolution that someone down the street made up? I don't even know. I did not have a chance to read my emails today about the changes to the resolution. I thought today we were going to be discussing the resolution from Friday, so I am blindsided by this, and that's part of my fault. I didn't read my emails. I found out my aunt was in the morgue since August, so that has been thrown on me along with this. So I think we need to table this resolution and really give the residents, even us, a chance to really discuss it. And of course that resident said that we discussed it on email. When other time will we get together and discuss it? Of course they're going to say that. Of course they know that we all called each other and tried to set up a vote. Of course. A resolution was posted Friday, and we also told residents that we weren't able to change it, because that's what we said Thursday, that nothing would be changed. And I'm sure residents came in today, had remarks on the resolution that they read and debated about and fought with their neighbors all weekend about. And then to come in and say, no, this is what we have. We decided to change it at the 5th hour. That I cannot. I sat here a few months ago when we talked about marijuana and said that was a problem with transparency. I also do not agree with this being thrown in the residents' lap at 6:30 during our working session. It doesn't have to go back to committees, but we can have a special meeting just around this resolution, since it seems like it takes the entire meeting to get through. I want to hear from everyone. I want to meet with everyone. I only met with 2, but I did speak to some and email other residents. So we need not to say that, anything else we're going to put aside. And I heard Abby's, also her comment to just pass and do revisions. I've been on this council long enough. We pass resolutions. It never gets revised again. It's filed in the clerk's office, and that's where it is. And we move on to the next issue that's thrown. We're back with Buckwoods. We're back with racial profiling, and we never review the resolution again. So with that being said, I am voting to table the resolution with a special meeting before our next meeting in November.
Councilwoman Welkowitz.
Thank you, Jennifer. I may not need to say this, but I'm exhausted, by the way. So this has been going on for quite some time, and I think people have referred to the hundreds of emails that we've received. It's, sure, Lynn. I think we've gotten 100 emails in the past 3 days. But that also spoke to me quite a bit. The intention of modifying this for today, it's a timing, it's a time issue. We've been working on this, and all of us, and I thank you all, and I thank all the residents too for this. We've been working on this to the point of exhaustion, but because of the flood of emails from all sides, I think we felt that we needed to take a closer, harder look at this. And we did that just today, and that's just the time that we had available. It's not perfect. We've made adjustments in the past to certain resolutions. Back when now we have the meeting out here, we've done it in the back before when we've changed a line or two in the last minute. This is a little bit more than that. But with the intention of what these words mean, if I can just spend a few moments, first off, the mayor asked for an anti-Semitism resolution. However, the idea of anti-BDS and to put this into the resolution came up. There's no way we can walk it back at this point. But so let's just go, a couple things. I don't have a prepared thing because I didn't know how this would play out at all. Education was always the first and foremost thing we had planned to do. And in fact, Mayor, I believe you had Rabbi Reed here.
Yes, I had her come to the Human Relations Commission.
We had already started that program. The reason that ADL and faith-based organizations are in here are because some people wanted that specific language. But we also added and other knowledgeable parties to provide programming because we wanted to make it open and have, whoever we can get or whoever would like to come, we want to make that available. The education part was never about any kind of propaganda or any kind of indoctrination about anti-BDS. That was never the issue. Melanie, I'm kind of you guys said, you said something. No, I'm going to repeat it. You and Randy Solomon both said something about spending taxpayer money on educating people about BDS. That was never the intention. The intention is about anti-Semitism. Now, if I can talk, with regard to BDS, it's never about a lack of freedom of speech. It's not about not giving a voice to Palestinians. The problem is, I honestly feel that I can smell, taste, and feel anti-Semitism when it's there. And the things that I've heard about BDS, I remember more than 10 years ago when it first cropped up, I think, on the Berkeley campus. It didn't smell right to me. It still doesn't. some of the tactics that are being used right now, not just even by BDS, but by white supremacists. They're online, there's stuff out there, and our kids are looking at them. There was just an episode, I believe it was on CNN, I was trying to reach for it the other day. A mom was saying she was looking at her son's phone, she saw the Nazi symbol, and she asked him what it was about, and she scrolled down to it, and she drilled down to it, and it starts by using language, words like trigger, other words that anti-Semitics use. And it becomes something that the kids hear and they repeat it. They don't even know what they're saying. This is the insidious nature of stuff like this. And it scares me. What happened in our community triggered me just like it triggered people out there. And I believe we were targeted. I believe that whether or not the book came to us innocently or not, it was picked up by people that I believe are anti-Semitic. That's a problem for me because it hit our community. I just want to thank Rabbi Baisley, if he's still here. Thank you, sir. Thank you for reminding us to treat each other better. There's not one group of anything anywhere on the planet that is going to agree 100%. But Jew calling another Jew anti-Semitic has got to stop. It has to stop. And because we're trying to weed out anti-Semitism, that does not mean we don't care about Palestinians. I don't want to be here discussing the rights of Palestinians, nor do I particularly want to be discussing the right of the state of Israel. However, Hava, I like the words that you used. It's layered upon each other. Anyway, I don't really know what more I have to say.
Excuse me? No.
This is the council. This is legit. He's out of order. He's out of order.
Okay, Ira, you're out of order. Ira. Oh, okay, everybody, one of your council people just asked for civility, okay?
That's true.
Okay, Ira, you're out of order. Ira, there has to be, no. Okay, Ira, you're out of order. I'm sorry, but you aren't. Okay, Elsie, Susie, do you want?
You gotta vote.
I am going to. So 3 noes?
Right. That's how it became.
Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. But, okay. I just wanted to finish saying again, there's no group on the planet that's going to have 100% agreement in anything. But we've got to try looking at this. By the way, when that Peace for Palestine book was appeared, a very good friend of mine is from Egypt, and this is, please just hear me out. For Palestinians, the word intifada doesn't mean the same thing it means to Jews. I just want people to understand that. We live in a diverse community, one of the most diverse. And with that, not only comes privilege, but comes responsibility. And we do need to listen to each other. Again, I meant nothing. I meant no lack of freedom of speech for people who do support BDS, but there are things about the tactics that they use that I find anti-Semitic in any event. I don't want to table this. We've worked too hard. We've gotten too close. I want to pass this.
Borough Clerk, can you just tally the votes, please?
That would be 3 yes, 2 table, 1 no.
Okay. I don't get a vote.
What does it mean?
Well,
Well, the status of the voting is this. If there was to have been an abstention, which there was none, that would count as a nullity, and that wouldn't be counted in the vote. However, by expressing themselves to vote to table, that is, 2 members of council voted to table, that means they did not vote in favor of the resolution. I believe the vote is 3 in favor, 3 opposed, and the mayor makes the call. Sorry.
Got it.
look, the right thing is going to be different things to different people. So whoever said that, I just want you to know that. Everyone had a chance to speak before they made their vote. I'm going to do the same thing. I cannot tell you how incredibly disappointed I am about the process that we went through on this. I know my council members, and you know, forgive me, everyone who knows me well knows I tear up. That doesn't mean I'm going to start crying, but I get emotional, okay? My council members have worked very hard on this. My Human Relations Commission lost 3 commissioners over this. 3 good commissioners. Almost 7 months ago, after I heard of the first incident that happened on Raritan Avenue, to a man walking to shul, to temple, during Passover, I asked this council for an anti-Semitism resolution. I asked for a resolution so that we can do educational programming about anti-Semitism. I asked for a resolution so I can work with our police department and public safety committee to address these issues of people feeling unsafe. And to Stephanie, when you talked about first hearing about guns going to synagogues or whatever, we have had an active group of members from every synagogue working with our police department on how to make their synagogue safer. And when I heard one of these synagogue members ask if they could carry their guns to synagogue, I was sickened. I'm very sorry. This is a very emotional issue for me. Susie, I don't know how you composed yourself. Susie's parents are Holocaust survivors. I say to my husband almost every day, I'm glad your parents are not living through this, because they lived through it once before. I wanted a resolution on anti-Semitism 7 months ago. I asked for a resolution on anti-Semitism.
That is true.
I went to the Human Relations Commission with Rabbi Esther Reed, from Hillel, who teaches about anti-Semitism every single year at Rutgers. She came, and I see members of the commission here. She came and she gave a presentation about the horrifying rise in anti-Semitic incidents in Highland Park, in Middlesex County, and in New Jersey. And today, 7 months later, we're all still arguing about anti-Semitism as a resolution here in Highland Park? Once the issue of Israel and BDS got added here, it blew everything up. Why was it added? Because we were targeted. I am a firm believer in freedom of speech. I've said this before. I'm going to make a lot of people unhappy. I asked for a resolution on anti-Semitism here in Highland Park. I am not a supporter of BDS. I love Israel. My husband is Israeli. My family is in Israel. They feel threatened also. But my job as mayor here in Highland Park is to keep my residents safe. It's all our jobs. If the addition of language about BDS is going to make any single one of my residents targeted more, then that cannot happen. I vote, sorry, members of council, I vote to table this resolution. Don't applaud. I'm not happy about that. We're going on 8 months now. My residents are being attacked on the streets. Don't applaud this. We need to come back with a resolution that addresses the issues here in Highland Park. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
And this is how we're going to move forward.
Okay, but I want to,
I know,
Stephanie,
but
sit down. Please sit down, Stephanie. Okay. I'm saying that,
Let's
but I'm not done.
We didn't get our way.
I'm not done. It is now October 29th. It is now October 29th. We have a council meeting on November 12th. That's 2 weeks from now. I want a revised resolution on the agenda 2 weeks from now. Okay? Does everybody hear me? The Human Relations Commission has weighed in. The Equity Commission has weighed in, as of just the other day. This council has to come up with something that will keep our residents safe so that when my friends' children, who are young boys, are walking on the streets in Highland Park with a kippah on their heads, they're not feeling that they're going to be targeted. So that when my friends' fathers are walking on the streets of Highland Park to go to synagogue, some disturbed individual is not going to walk out of a store on Raritan Avenue and follow them. I can't even tell you what was said. I can't utter those words. Our residents have to feel safe. We have to stop fighting one another. That's all I can say. We have other agenda items, folks.
Just one more vote.
Yeah. Appoint Albert,
Oh.
and then we're done. It's 11 o'clock.
Yep. Council people, I'm about to appoint Alvin Chin to the Board of Adjustment.
It's the mayor's appointment.
May I have a motion to adopt?
So moved. Second?
Second.
Whatever, whatever.
Roll call?
Councilman Fine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Foster Dublin. Councilman George,
Yes.
Councilman Hale,
Yes.
Councilwoman Kim Chohan,
Yes.
Councilwoman Walkovitz.
I'm delighted to welcome Alvin Chin to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Believe it or not, we have another public discussion session. Is there anyone that feels the great urge and necessity to speak?
At 11 o'clock.
Thank you.
We
Is
agreed
it,
on something. That's great.
You're right, it's the beginning, we agree on something.
we are supposed to adjourn for 5 minutes and go into work session. It is now 11 o'clock.
May I
I'm
make
going to ask the council members if there is anything on the work session that they have to have discussed today. Tell me, otherwise I'd like to table all of this until our next council meeting.
Mayor, I suggest we adjourn after the work session. I know of one item that's important, but it can wait till next session.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right. Then may I have a motion to adjourn?
We gotta know that.
Second.
Thank you all.
Susan.